All right, episode 22 of the PoddyC starts right now here on this channel. I'm Dratnos, joined by Max and Dorki. What
Yo,
up?
yo, yeah,
On this
we're doing
channel?
this
That's
at
right.
3 a.m. by
Are
the
we
way.
live streaming?
No, but it's on
Oh,
this YouTube channel or this,
oh,
Spotify channel.
true. This is
Yep.
Yeah.
we do have our own channel. Yep. Pod hi everyone. Yeah, we are
Mhm.
we are looking to talk about this is a new day also. Shout out Fridays just in general. We are coming to you. This should be our new uh release day, I think, for the foreseeable future, at least for the next like 6 months. Which I guess is kind of like will probably just become the day. It's reason why we talked about it a little bit before, and most of you guys were like okay with it, but the reasoning is, like we're recording this right now, and a new alpha build just came out today, and like season 4 came out on Tuesday. If we released on Monday, we would have not been able to talk about any of those things, and then also our next episode would have talked about all of those things, but just way too late. So it just kind of makes sense to be Fridays now. So we're Friday gamers. Hope all of you guys can still enjoy us the same ways. But happy Friday to you guys. What was your favorite part of this last week? A lot of content.
For me, it was actually the Race to World last, and it wasn't particularly close. Like, watching your stream on that last day of watching the guilds trying to kill Fireack is, I don't know, it's pretty special. It's, rare for guild working on a boss outside of the Race to World first to have such a binary, like, win or lose, right? Like, for my
Oh,
guild
true,
working
yeah.
on Fireack, we killed it a day. If we'd killed it the day before, we would actually been really happy because we would have beat BDG and that would have been really sweet. But aside from that, if we killed it the day after,
They
also would
died,
have been
man.
the same.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I know, but they died and we never got to beat them. We're so close. We're 3 hours off. It's so close.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another big thing too is like there's not a lot of moments to have a bunch of eyes on people progging kills because like often do you ever really see people progging on kills except for watching Race to War first or like occasionally you'll tune into a streamer that's doing it, but yeah, like for the most part you don't really
Yeah,
tune
but
into
there's no
people.
stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Right.
this time, the stakes
Like
were
you can
so
That's true.
high.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
for the last 6 months, you could have watched a bunch of people progress the last boss, but it's just like, okay, maybe I've seen this before. If they kill it tonight, cool, but if they kill it tomorrow, great. And they also have like 4 more months to do it before it's not a thing. And this time it was like, okay, if they don't get it tonight, then they're never gonna get it. And it was kind of sad. There were some guilds that like really tried and pushed along, and they had to like convince people to stay late, and then some of those guilds killed it, and some of those guilds didn't, right? And they had to be like, we'll see you next year, and it was so sad. Um, yeah, it was really, like, you mentioned watching my stream. It was really fun for me to do that. The unfortunate part is I don't think I can do it for like the entire next expansion, right? Because
What do
like
you mean?
I've thought about doing it before, but the last day of the season, at least with the simultaneous release, was always right before we started
Oh,
raiding.
yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So like, I mean, it would be highly irresponsible of me to spend that day
yeah, that'd be real bad.
farming content on Twitch and watching people.
Fuck him, dude.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
is. I'm thinking about it now. There's also, I guess, the week that Hall of Fame closes. That one has a little bit of a similar vibe because my guild, we watch guilds that time. Like we get in Discord together and watch those, and it has a bit of a similar vibe
Oh,
on
that's a good
the
idea.
Monday. So,
Yeah, that's a great idea. What the hell?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a super good idea. I feel like I could. I mean, because I didn't realize how good content it would be. There was a ton of you. I think YouTube and Twitch, I had like 12K or something, which is usually doesn't happen outside of alpha beta season or something related to new patches. So yeah, people obviously really liked it. I'll try to find a way. Actually, now that there's not a simultaneous release of Heroic and Mythic, I could definitely, not stay up all night, but I could definitely stream the day before Heroic comes out, 100%. It's actually the day before Mythic, where it's just like that entire day is jam-packed, and I can just only imagine me and my guild are at some event and preparing all week, and then like on Monday, which is when you're getting everything set in stone, it's just like, all right, I'm just in here streaming, guys, just do your own thing. Like
Yeah,
that's
just have them do. Yeah,
crazy.
just have them work on their stuff. Well, screw them, man.
No, that's not how that I'm like there for everything, so I can't. That would, I mean, it would be, they would lose their faith in me and be
They
right
can
in
figure
doing
it out.
They would lose their faith in me and be right in doing so. But yeah, that's Race World. Yeah, I didn't even think you guys wanted. I honestly kind of forgot about that. Like, it was really fun to root for those teams. They were also, some of them were pretty funny. They were getting in with the bits. It
There
was
was a lot
one
of
of my most enjoyable streams.
a lot of ASCII art in your chat as well.
Yeah, yeah. So we can get this out. So they were posting a lot of bird cocks, and I didn't want them to do that, but like the more I was genuinely like, guys, stop posting bird cocks. This is so funny because there's some of our listeners that weren't there for that are just like, whoa, that went crazy real fast. But yeah, there was some ASCII images put around, but they were posted in good taste. No one was trying to be weird. They were just like really hyped, and the way that they expressed that was by posting birds.
Robin. Yep.
Yeah, Robin. There is one with THD's head. Man, it really was good. Actually, I think Frank might be making I don't know if it's out yet, but I think he wanted to make a mashup of like all of the reactions and stuff of that, which might be kind of cool. But yeah, I actually wanted to ask you guys, are you guys playing season 4?
Yeah, I've been playing a shit ton. It's actually been pretty fun.
So you like it?
Yeah, I mean, I always look forward to season 4. Like, I know you guys hate season 4 because like no new raid, blah blah blah, but I'm still a season 4 enjoyer, even though we didn't like add a whole lot. I mean, it's still always fun. Like for me, the most fun part has been playing Demon Hunter in the content that I've done already, because like yeah, I've already done all these dungeons, blah blah blah, but being a Demon Hunter in there is completely different, which kind of says a lot. Like
the
just being able
raid?
to do all.
Oh, even
No,
the
no, no.
dungeons, you mean?
Especially
Well,
the
the
dungeons.
dungeon. Well, actually, okay. I guess the raid too. So like, I did also do the raid on Havoc Demon Hunter because I'm trying to get my Demon Hunter cleared or geared, and it's kind of like a new experience, right? Because I haven't really done prog on Havoc yet, and it's been kind of nice.
You're playing Havoc.
In
Yeah,
raid.
because I get it geared.
Did you not play Havoc last season when you were playing Vengeance?
No, I was a Feral Druid main. So
Oh,
first season
yeah,
I was
yeah.
playing DK. Second season I was playing I don't remember what the hell I played second season. And the third season I played Feral.
Yeah, okay. I played a ton last season just because I thought Havoc was so fun. So if you are experiencing that again, basically, then that totally makes sense as to why you'd enjoy it. Also, I just don't think you enjoying it is a surprise. Like, as far as I can tell, High Mythic Plusers are actually kind of okay with what it used to be, which was just doing the same dungeons for like 2 years. So you guys doing them for only the second time, I feel like is not surprising that you like that. And also, and if that's the case, then it's just another Mythic Plus season, kind of. And they made the acquisition of raid gear like way easier. So like, it's kind of just like a good Mythic Plus season, right? No seasonals, no experimenting. I think you advocated for that a bit, but like, other than that, you're just gonna be able to play the game and have fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do really wish we had seasonals or like something a little bit extra oomph, like a little bit frosting on the cake, but it's still enjoyable. Like I'm still having fun with, especially like the first week. I think the first week of a new season will almost always be fun, regardless of season 4 or whatever. Like you're just re-gearing up a character, and like everyone's playing the game. Because like something that I didn't really think would be fun or interesting, or like that didn't occur to me is right now the gearing process, you actually have to do almost everything. You have to be doing world content that I haven't touched in forever. The whole yes chef thing, I was doing that with a bunch of dudes. Like I was gearing with Goop and Yips and a couple other dudes, Growl, and we were just like out there doing some world content. We were doing the siege of Dragonbane Keep to get weekly stuff. We were doing the time walking raid. We actually did Black Temple, and we actually wiped to the last boss once somehow. And we did Dawn of the Infinite hard mode. That's also kind of fun. You actually should give it a shot. It's actually kind of challenging, and I feel like this is probably something a lot of people don't know. By the way, if you guys are listening right now, you guys should probably do Dawn of the Infinite hard mode. I had so many people asking me in chat when I was doing it, why are you doing Dawn of Infinite? I'm telling you that hard mode is kind of challenging, and it gives you a ton of loot. It gives you 509 item level, I believe, or it gives you like something that's in the heroic track, and it's like really good stuff, like Iridolf Staff and Cheat Death and whatever.
I mean, maybe not most, but many specs have a BIS item that comes from there, right? Like if you like Mirror, Iridol, Prophetic Stone Scales, Double Time, Nick of Time, any of those on the hero track being BIS for your spec, which they are for each of those is for some specs, then congrats, Dawn of the Infinite hard mode is the place you should go. But even if not, it drops one hero track item per boss, right? Which is more than you're getting out of M plus, and it drops the same eye level gear as a Mythic plus 10. Although weirdly, it only puts a +0 in your vault, so. And it puts like 2 +0s in your vault. It puts 1 when you kill.
Wait, so can you actually get stuff from Dawn of the Infinite in
I don't
your
think
vaults?
so. I think it just gives you an M0 vault and I think that vault's going to be like Dragonflight Dungeons M0, but I don't know for sure. That would be wild if it did. But even so, it would be lower. It was 506 eye level, so it would be lower eye level than you could just drop from the bosses on hard mode. I don't know. I'm pretty happy about season 4, like M plussing as well. I've done a little bit of Havoc or Vengeance as well as Blood and Keys, and I don't know, Vengeance Demon Hunter in the season 1 and season 2 dungeons is kind of crazy. Like you go into the Halls of Infusion first few pulls or whatever, you remember being a bear and like needing to set up all these CC chains, and you're just Vengeance Demon Hunter, you just do it all yourself. It's wild. I don't know.
I think that's really interesting because like the tank meta is so secure that, you know, if you weren't a paladin or wait, what was the other tank even in season 1? What was paladin?
It was
and what?
Prot Warrior at the start,
before.
and then Warrior fell off, and Paladin came up over the course.
Oh yeah,
of the season.
that was when Paladin had that super great tier, right? Like they were just like way stronger than every other tank.
They got buffed over the course of like in 10.0.5. There was I think a Prot Pally buff / slight rework.
Oh, same time as Ret. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Or 10.0.7 or something. So yeah, and then Prot Warrior got nerfed like 6 times over the course of that season as well because it started out giga OP.
Okay, I kind of want to talk about my experience in season 4 a little bit, but I also want to go on a huge tangent about whether you guys are having fun just playing Vengeance in there for the first time, but also how we should handle Vengeance Demon Hunter and the fact that it is just like twice as good as three times as good as any class in the game at doing those stops, and whether that's a thing.
Been a big talking point for sure.
Yeah, they should nerf that. Yes.
Yeah, like,
well,
but
so
how do you nerf it without nerfing the fun, you know?
You
yeah,
nerf the fun.
okay, so why is it fun first? Let's start with that.
Because having multiple charges of things, and this is just in general anger management, you could probably think of 10 different buttons in this game that are like this, where you spend resources and actively play the game, and it massively reduces the cooldowns on things that you want to press. That is super fun. That is like one of the most fun things in this game. But the fact that you guys are getting reduction on your sigils and you also have 2 charges of all of them and they all mass CC a big group of things is like clearly way too good and no other class can compete with it. Like I would be scared next expansion of, damage is king. Yeah, survival is king as tanks. But I feel like you would start every single season with how do we make Vengeance work because just no one else has to think. And that just has so much value, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is why it's fun as well. Like, it's fundamentally fun to single-handedly keep the pack under control, right? And it's also just fun to be able to do a pull that otherwise would require 5 people being coordinated, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do in a lot of groups just by having a Vengeance Demon Hunter pressing sigils off CD.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's good.
I was expecting more of Dratnos'. Yeah, I was gonna say that too. So I wasn't expecting your response, Max. I mean, it is pretty true, but like that was not what I was expecting. Like,
what do you
it is
mean?
true that it. Because the reason why I think people love VDH for so much is what Dratnos said. Like, they think it's a lot of fun because you can pull massive. Pulling big equals fun, right? Like that's just reality. If you don't think so, what the hell is wrong with you? But
well, it's not even if you're pulling
fun, so
big, right? It's like any pull size you do, your Vengeance Demon Hunter can control it, right? Like 5
okay,
mobs
but
just
I'm
as well.
saying like, okay, but if you were pulling 5 mobs at a time only, then Vengeance is like nowhere near as fun, right?
Yeah,
like,
but it's
you
still
were
like,
just like
good.
Yeah,
you still
it's
just
still
like
good, but I'm saying,
silence
like,
it, silence it again, fear it
sure,
again,
but I mean,
change
like,
it, change it again,
if the
right?
dungeon
Like,
forced you to pull 5 mobs at a time, right? Like, say you were doing Rise and you were just fighting 2 dragons. Like, being a Vengeance is whatever.
Yeah.
But like, Vengeance enables fun. Like, Vengeance lets you pull massive and you do like all these cool things. So I think that's like the first part of it. And the second part of it is I also think they can do what people who would normally require a ton of coordination can do. So like, like if you wanted to do a crazy pull before, it would require all 5 of you to be on Discord and you have to like communicate and do all the kicks and stops. But if you're playing with Vengeance, Vengeance just kind of handles it all. And that's always fun. I mean, it's kind of like how the whole tanks don't like healing, right? Like nobody likes to rely on other players to do things, which is like a large reason why I think Vengeance is like so enjoyed. And it kind of says a lot. It just means like, how do you fix this? Because a lot of people suggest just giving more utility to other tanks, right? But I feel like that's such a
Ooh.
slippery slope.
That's a
Like,
huge
nah.
slippery slope. That's
Yeah,
like
that's like such
Diablo
a problem.
3, like the Diablo 3 problem where like it's like, oh, just never nerf anything, just always buff everything to be as good as and then that's just how you have things hitting for like quintillion amounts of damage, you know?
It's like the defensive problem, exactly.
Well, yeah, it is the defense. It's exactly what happened with defensives in the last expansion, yeah. But like let me throw a counterpoint. For one thing, let me just say I completely agree with you. I think like especially I tanked for a really long time, like tanks having more agency in general is something that I really really enjoy. Do we think that that's a problem in the game in a role that is already probably the most difficult to go season to season in a bunch of new dungeons and a bunch of tank players feel like the role of the tank is so important that if you also add the majority of the stops
They're the CC'er, yeah.
exactly, like if you add you're the CC'er, is that putting too much stress on the role of tank for the majority of people who play this game?
100%. I've made that argument so many times because like people ask in my chat all the time, like, how do they fix DH? Like, can't they just add more utility? Like, well, I wish Bear had this, and that, right? But I'm just like, no, guys. If you do that, that's just gonna put way too much responsibility on the tank. That's already like a role that is somewhat underplayed because people don't want that responsibility. Like first of all, you have to worry about surviving, and then like you have to do your tank jobs, worry about aggro, and then outside of that, you have to worry about routing and leading the group, and then maybe you're the one also having to call stuff in pugs, and on top of that, you're having them be like the sole CC'er guy in charge of like basically life or death of your team because if you fail to do your silent sigil one time and all the casts go off, you just instantly wipe. Yeah, I think that's not a good solution.
Yeah, the other solution that's always been talked about is, hey, maybe just reduce the amount of things that mobs do, so you don't need a bunch of stops to pull big, and pull big is the way. Like I think Blizzard has gone through a long road of this. I think Blizzard is terrified of everything is just a mass pull, especially because there are classes in this game that are great at that, and there are classes that are supposed to be great at 5 targets and 3 targets and 8 targets, and those should be better at those targets than mass AoEers are at those target counts. That's not always how it works out, but that is, they don't want the game to be that one-dimensional, and that I actually kind of agree with. I also agree with one other thing, which is I think the world where, and let's go to the most extreme version of this, and I don't think anyone's actually asking for this, but just for the sake of argument, let's just say mobs do like basically nothing, and just every dungeon is just you pull, everything's a mass pull, right? Forget about the meta and everything else like that. I actually think that would be boring. I think you would do that, and that is fun. I think right now it is so fun because it's so few and far between that you get to do that, that when you get to do it, it's sweet. But like if every single pull was that, I genuinely think even the players advocating for it now would find that a little tiresome. And I don't really know what the solution is there. Micro CC and just CC in general in this game is kind of a big thing. We've also seen 4 of the dungeons now. Probably talk about this a little bit more later with Alpha, but like, I don't know, all those packs seem like they're doing the same amount of stuff that Shadowlands and Dragonflight dungeons did. It's not like they've massively changed their design philosophy in one way. But yeah, the problem of Demon Hunter does persist. Is the game better if they just make it where Demon Hunters only have one charge of everything again, and every other tank is more in line? I don't know if that's true for high-end players. If they give every single tank, which is I think the most unrealistic thing, if they give every single tank something that competes with that, which is I think that's nonsense. Like there's no way that, like, what would you even do? Like you'd have to just invent a bunch of new abilities that all have to be keybound, and they're actively removing keybinds at the moment. You know what I mean? Like it's just never gonna happen. But it seems like an unsolvable problem without a lot of other drawbacks, except for nerfing Demon Hunter. So
Yeah.
I think they're gonna nerf Demon Hunter.
I think that they should just nerf Demon Hunter. Like, I don't think that's bad if
Yeah.
there's a tank that has a niche as like, hey, I have a lot of control. I think that can be better Demon Hunter, and I think that could be fine, and that could be the reason it's good in some seasons. And I think you can do that if it has 5 stops instead of 7, right? And that's like, you do something like that, right? And then we're chilling.
Yeah.
Because right now it literally does have, what, 2 silences, 2 grips, 2 fears, one Chaos
Stun.
Nova, right? Like that's a wild amount of CC, and it should just they should just tune that down a little bit until it no longer is oppressing everything else out of the consideration. Dorky,
I would
what,
say
what are
by
you up
far
to?
the biggest culprit is mobs that spam cast. Like
Hmm.
I am super against mobs that don't have a cooldown on their cast. And by that I mean like like Cinderbolt for example.
Oh,
Like
dude, or
generally
melt.
bolt abilities. Yeah, like bolt abilities, they just spam them. They don't have any cooldowns. Those are like by far the biggest culprit because Silent Sigil is effectively anywhere from like 3 to 5 stops in a row because like it just completely shuts them down, right? Whereas whenever it's mobs that just cast once and then you stop them, they don't recast. Silent Sigil is like nice, but it's not like as big of a deal. Whereas like an in-cap roar would be almost as effective.
Yeah,
Best
like
example I could
Azure
use is
Vault,
like,
right? Like
yeah,
the
yeah, I was gonna say
the
that,
the
Azure
four
Vault and
pulls in
Flowers,
Azure
right?
Vault where you have the frontal doers, right? And it's like, okay,
Right.
a single target stop, an AoE stop are both the same value because they have that tech where they don't all cast at the same time.
Yeah.
And when you stop one of them, it goes on CD for 15 seconds, right? Versus melt spam casters in Neltharis or whatever, where it's like, okay, if you don't actually like if you kick this thing, I guess it goes on spell CD, but if you stop it, as soon as the stop's over, it just starts recasting again. So yeah, Silent Sigil is getting 10 times the value of a single target stun instead of similar value. So I agree with you. Actually, I think that mobs doing stuff in dungeons is fine, but they should absolutely tone down the amount of mobs where you can interact with them and it's still not enough to stop them from like blasting you if you don't use the right interaction, and that like Sigil of Silence being super OP for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back to the whole point of like doing large pulls, I think the biggest thing they need to nail by far is allowing individuals to be responsible for their own mechanics when you're doing a large pull. Because I think that's the biggest distinction going back from BFA to now. Like in BFA, everyone was sort of in charge of their own mob, right? Like you look at Underrot. Underrot's probably the best example. You have a lasher, you just stick one person to each lasher, right? Like this rogue will kick this lasher, this tank will kick this lasher, and there's the blood swarmer that's fixing someone. That person is in charge of that blood swarmer, and then there's the maggot stopper, right? So everyone's kind of having their jobs allocated somewhere, and you're enabled to do these large pulls, but it's not like there's nothing going on in these large pulls. That would be the worst case scenario, right? Like if you're just doing a plain old large pull, it does get kind of boring. Like I know everyone loves that shit in freehold, but I was personally not like a freehold lover. Like I enjoy freehold, but it was never considered my favorite dungeon. But like my favorite dungeons have always been like Underrot, for example, where you can do large pulls, but
Yeah.
everyone just has a job and they're allocated to do something. And I think if they can keep design dungeons like that, or just
Good
designing
point.
mechanics like that, it keeps the game extremely engaging while having the fun of like doing a large pull. Like everyone does their job. You're doing big AoE damage. I think that's great design.
I know we went on a bit of a tangent and I will get to my season 4 take, but just one more thing while we are talking about stops is something else they mentioned recently, which is now that we've been in the Dragon Isles for a bit, Dracthyr have now learned how to be other classes. We don't know exactly what they're going to
Oh
be
yeah,
yet, but they mentioned in the War Within that, you're going to be able to be a Dracthyr like warrior or something, right? And I feel like that is going to have a tremendous impact on Mythic Plus because that means that every single class that can be a Dracthyr gains 2 stops. They gain Tail
yeah,
Swipe and they gain Wing Buffet or Wing Buffet as we call it.
and it can
Right?
glide too.
True.
Yeah, that's actually I wonder when they made Evoker, I don't know how careful they were as to what power came from Evoker and what came from Dracthyr because Dracthyr was Evoker and Evoker was Dracthyr. But
There's
now that
literally
Dracthyr
like Dracthyr racial interactions in the Evoker talent tree as well.
correct,
Yeah.
Yeah.
involving. So I wonder if they'll make Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet part of Evoker because they could I think that it would be kind of I think every single group would be Dracthyr if they could in Mythic Plus if they changed it right now. There'd be some Shadow Meld stuff kind of which has always kind of been a thing, but like I mean if you can gain 2 stops, like especially if they if they nerf Vengeance, I mean, that is massive, especially for no comms groups.
It'd be like Blood Elf Silence, actually. Dude, Blood Elf Silence was so OP.
Oh, if you were to bring back old racials?
Yeah.
Bro, if they never nerfed Blood Elf Silence, no one would have ever race changed away from that. If people are in this game didn't play or like started playing in BFA or something, Arcane Torrent from Blood Elves used to interrupt every single mob and silence them for like a second or something. It was extremely broken.
It was like 2 seconds, I think. Yeah, it's
2 seconds.
silent sigil on your entire party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every dungeon would just pull it all, right? Pull it all, Dancing Moon Weapon, Mass Grip, Blood Elf, Blood Elf, Blood Elf, Blood Elf, Blood Elf, Stun, 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 Kite. That was
Yep, that was
every
Legion.
single dungeon.
Yeah, when Legion owned too.
That was fun.
Good
Yeah,
for its time.
Oh.
Yeah, that was fun.
We were having a blast. I think that's always how you make M+. Like you were talking about Underground Dorki versus Freehold, right? And it's like, it's not that the mobs don't do anything, is that you find a way to make the mobs not do anything, and that feels really satisfying, right? Like you find a way to make a big pull happen.
Like you counter them all, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And like the problem with Legion is the same problem with Vengeance Demon Hunter, where it's like, okay, the answer is the same for every pack because I either have 5 Blood Elves or 7 Sigils, right? And like that is too much. But when you're actually doing it with like a little bit of different class utility, a little bit different in each comp, it's really fun. It's a blast. So, and it was just also fun back in Legion because it was the first time we were all doing it, and so it was just it was good even though it was broken. But that wouldn't be fun if they did that for another expansion. But yeah, I agree.
Yo,
I think Evoker, or I think Dracthyr meta comp, like 5 Dracthyr, if they can be every class or most classes, it sounds pretty insane.
I mean, what do you guys think can be a Dracthyr?
They already mentioned warriors in a previous interview.
The ones that stick out to me as like most unlikely would be like Shaman, Druid, Paladin, because those are all kind of or Shaman, Druid, Paladin, maybe DK, DH. Yeah. Those ones are the ones I'd be more skeptical of, although, I guess they already kind of shapeshift as a race, so maybe Druid fits in there, but those ones all have like different lore, factions or whatever that they'd have to retcon the Dracthyr into, or have some kind of story about Dracthyr becoming shamans like they did for goblins and all those sorts of stuff. So I don't know. I think though that you could make a pretty good comp even if they couldn't be those classes in a lot of seasons with 4 Dracthyr or 3, because you don't need everybody, right? You just like every single one is good. It's not like Night Elves where the 5th Shadow Meld on the last person adds a lot of extra value as well.
Yeah. I want to bring it back to season 4 just to tie this up. I going into this season, obviously there was no new raid. I just want to say I'm positive about season 4 for the entire game. It was made very clear to us from Blizzardman that season 4 was not a replacement for a raid. That changes things massively for me. I think the perception that we lost a raid for this is trash. That's just not true. Also, some people consider Plunderstorm part of season 4, and if you consider Plunderstorm part of it, and then MoP Remix is part of season 4, then obviously that gives it a lot more to just say that, like, kind of just objectively better overall for everyone than just doing a Myrdrasil farm for another 4 months or something, right? But I wasn't like built to like this season. I in general do not find, and this is why I don't do a ton of Mythic Plus unless I'm really loving the class I'm currently playing. I don't like doing things more than a couple times or once. Like I do the race world first, I'm super into it, and then I do our first few farm clears, and then I don't show up to farm for a long time. I want nothing to do with that. Mythic Plus dungeons, you like do them at a high enough level to learn, how you die, what you need to have to live things, and how to do damage, and that problem solving process is fun. But then that's figured out, and it's just do that over and over and over again, higher, and there's a little innovation, but it's that little innovation is not enough to like usually keep me there. And then there's also the classes you're playing. Sometimes in a new tier, or I guess a new patch, you literally have new tier that changes the way your class plays a little bit. Sometimes there's like reworks, and like I don't really main any particular class, so I'll usually target a class that I think looks way more fun for that specific season. Pretty much all of those reasons are why I play the game are not in season 4. They're the same dungeons we've already done. Want nothing to do with that. They're the same raids we've already done. I have no interest in doing that. And these are the classes that I really want to play. They're just the same tier we had last season. So this just I mean, there's a zero chance that I would make a character and do any content. I haven't and I wouldn't. But I have enjoyed one thing, and I think it's really cool. Is we did the raid when it first came out, but we didn't like equip any upgrades or spend any crests or do anything. We just went into Mythic as soon as it came up, and I was hoping with it. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this, but just to like kind of see how some of our newer players that we don't get to see a lot in progression handled a progression environment. Hopefully, if they made one. And then also just to, I don't know, you do a lot of meaningless farm for a while, and we do this for a living, so you want to just put yourself in a position to just feel something, you know, like have bosses cast some spells that might kill you and stuff like that. And it actually ended up being really fun. We spent like a 7-hour raid day on it one day, and then we just one-shot Razageth the next day. But it was really progression. Like Dathia, exact same progression pushes. Kurog, exact same progression pushes. Broodkeeper, same thing. Razageth, we literally phased higher on progression because we had like better classes for the shield and stuff like that. So we actually, even though it's not learning encounters, we were having to get good enough again at these fights and relearn them while doing the progression. We were taking just as much damage as we did in progression, and like scaled for our current eye level and stuff. Our health bars were moving, and having to go through that was really great for our guild. I was really impressed with how they played, but also it was super, super fun. And the best part is it doesn't mean the rest of the game has to suffer, because we killed that raid at, I think we killed Razageth at 496. We could have easily done it at like 492, and we killed everything else at 49 to 490. And everyone else's patch is going to be like almost 530. Those raids are going to get slaughtered, right? Once people have eye level, you know. So look at it this way, right? This patch, Tindral and Fyrak were tuned for us having 481. Everyone else killed at 488. Not that big of a difference, right? The Helm Enchant didn't really do a lot. We've talked about this a lot. This patch, these raids were tuned for us at 490, and everyone else is going to have, you know, almost 40 eye levels higher than that. So I think that opens up a bigger conversation as to, that's something they should aim for in every patch. You don't have to get it necessarily through eye level, but through power creep throughout the season. And I wonder if that would just solve a lot of problems that are already there.
Yeah, I mean, I think these raids should 100% be to the point where, like, once you're geared enough, you should just be able to slaughter these raids, like, regardless of tier.
Yeah, I think it's good.
I will say though, it's a little bit different because you also got to keep it you also got to account for the nerfs that it would normally do. Like the version you're doing right now is going to be the same version that everyone else is doing, even after 40 item levels.
Yeah, but 40 eye levels
Because
is
we
so
didn't
much.
really, well, I mean, maybe not 40, but I don't know. Like for our guild, I mean, our guild doesn't suck, right? Like we're still a top 50 world guild. I don't even know how we ranked that, like maybe top 30, 20, I don't even know. But now granted, we were not taking it super serious. Like we didn't have the right comp. Everyone was just kind of playing what they want. And due to the nature of it being faded, we were just kind of just more relaxed, right? But we were still fucking struggling hard. We went in with like 500-ish item level. We got hard-walled by Dathia. We got really tight Teros check, really tight Kurog check. Barely beat them both. And
Did that feel good or
it's
bad?
still a challenge.
Did you feel like you were wasting your time in there?
It felt good. No, it was
Okay.
still fun, right? Like I still had fun because, you know, again, I was playing Havoc. I was reprogging, but because I'm playing something new, it feels like. But if I was playing Pharaoh Druid again, or if I was playing Deke again, I would probably have like a pretty awful time.
Well, also, like, if you think about why you like raids, right? Like, you would like most raid content if it was challenging and you had to absorb all the information, figure out how to kill the fight. In this scenario, it's relearning it, right, rather than learning it for the first time.
Yeah,
But
like, that's the
then-
thing, though. Like, we already
but
knew
then
the fight.
killing it, right, and not spending 200 pulls doing that. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you went through the same thing you're going through this patch and you killed any boss you fought on a real patch in 50 pulls or something, you would only look at it positively. It's just only the point in which it gets old. In Faded, it's just going to not get old, and you're going to kill it before that point, right? Like, I mean, Dathia is a hard fight. Kurog, those checks are pretty real, right? But the thing is, you're gonna kill it, as opposed to spending weeks on it, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, my only real gripe is just that, like, oh, you know, kind of wish we could get shit quicker because it's faded. Which also, small tangent, but still faded related. The 120 crest cap. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it fucking
Ooh,
stinks.
yeah.
Like, I just, I swear it's faded. Just let us have fun. Just let us
Well,
quickly get gear,
they
do whatever the hell we want.
they didn't have any Valor cap the last time we had this season 4,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
could just get instantly full geared. I wonder what frightened them from allowing you to just farm infinite crests. Because I mean, like the Valor thing was pretty degen. I mean, you saw I think Dryny ran like 300 plus two
+2.
Grim Rails. Yeah, like
I
I mean,
remember that
I mean,
shit.
it was
Oh my
pretty
God.
generous. I mean, they're probably trying to fight FOMO. They're like, oh man, I want to play season 4, but I can't play 20 hours a day, so I'm just 20 eye levels behind everyone else that's doing content, and it's going to take me weeks to get there. Like maybe some cap is. Do you think uncapped is the right move, Dorky, or do you think they set the cap?
Yeah, I
too
mean
low?
it's season 4, right? Like I mean, I feel like the nature of season 4 is it's chill as hell. Like I think that's super underrated. I don't know if you guys feel the same. I'm sure there are people who are listening who feel the same. Where season 4, part of what's really nice about it is that it's chill. Like whenever a new patch starts, there's a somewhat of like a tension to stay on top. Like in a normal season, it's like, all right, I gotta like grind my ass off. I gotta make sure I'm getting enough gear so that I can properly prog heroic, and then like so that I can like keep my slot in mythic. There's none of there's well, at least I feel like there shouldn't be any of that tension in season 4. Season 4 is supposed to be like a chill season where you just do whatever you want. You don't have to play bottom spec. Just if you wanna go as hard as you want, or if you want to take it easy and just go slow, I feel like you should be given that option. But that's where I wish they just left the crest uncapped and just let players go wild if they really want to.
I think I agree with you, just in general.
For me, the bigger problem than the crests is like tier. So many of my guys are sitting on like 509 off pieces that I don't want to break my set
Oh,
bonus
that
to put
sucks too.
on,
Yeah, you
and I've
can't
got
mix
like
match your
one
pieces.
catalyst charge. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so if your spec voted for a season 1 or a season 2 set, you can put on two piece. But if your spec voted for a season 3 spec, you can't put on two piece. And if you put on 2 of the new set and 2 of the old set, you just get two piece, right? You don't get double benefit. So you just like, I'm just not going to break 4 piece on those specs. Like my vendor team in Hunter, for instance, I've got 2 509 pieces in my bag, so I'm not going to put on until not even next week, but probably the week after, unless I get handed a curio or a tier piece from raid, which that character I'm probably not going to be raiding on much. So
Okay, so
That
it's
sucks.
rough.
I have a
Annoying.
question for you, season 4 gamers. Then, so for 2 questions, kind of in one, you can answer both. So should they, because it's season 4, it's chill and it's relaxed, should they have just given you like a quest you could do that's like do a bunch of world quests, do a bunch of mythic, and then they just give you your new tier? Like, do you think the tier acquisition that exists in a normal patch should be vastly sped up in a season 4 kind of thing, or do you still think that it being the same is good? And then the second part is how has farming Flightstones again been? And how do you feel about that?
I haven't noticed it, but
I have
don't know
yet
if
to
you
run into the Flightstone problem, but I expect I will. Like right now, I've got a mastery heavy helmet on my DH, and I expect once I get a helmet with that mastery, and I want to upgrade that, I'll upgrade it, saving the crests, right, and spending the Flightstones, and I think I'll probably run out at that point, and then I'll be unhappy. Flightstones, I think they need to put some better sources of like Flightstones into the game. I tweeted this recently, but like I think they should just put some world quests in the game that give you 200 of those, or something like that. So if you're ever light on Flightstones, you can just look on your world map and like spend 10 minutes and go get a bunch. But at least right now, I haven't run into that yet. I do think that they should. I actually think that eye level is kind of the least thing that I care about being gated behind. Like I don't mind having my eye level sort of be capped at 500 this week or whatever, and then going up a little bit over the next couple weeks. I just mostly care about like the amount of time gate on upgrading my embellishment pieces, upgrading my tier pieces, and how many like, okay, if I get various trinkets, I'm obviously not going to replace good trinkets with, shitty world quests or dungeon trinkets that are not better than that. If I get any tier piece, any slot in any tier slot, I'm not going to put that on. If I get any piece in either of my embellishment slots, I'm not going to put those on, right? Like, so across my 14 slots on my character, like 7 of them are just not upgradable early on. That's my biggest gripe. I actually
That's so
wouldn't
true.
mind, like, I wouldn't mind if they did a thing with season 4 where it's like, okay, our upgrade tracks only go up to 502. If you get any item that's higher than 502, it's not an upgrade track this first week. If you got anything below 502, it's champion 1 out of 4 or whatever. You can bring it up to 502. And then next week, we bring that level up to 505. And then the next week, we bring up to 508. And by the time we're going into War Within, it's 550. And like, you could go to Myth Track 10 out of 10 if you want on any piece. And you're just like giga strong. And I wouldn't mind doing something like that with eye level. I personally don't care as much about the crest cap or the eye level being lower. I just don't like that I've got several things that should be upgrades in my bags that I can't put on because they're gonna break my tier set.
Yeah, even like accessory, like getting a ring that's bad stat is so much worse
No
than just
hole.
wearing your old ring that's bit stats and has a hole.
Also, the amount
That
of
definitely feels really bad.
non-tradable upgrades that have dropped for me and my group in M Plus so far, like non-tradable, non-upgrades, right? Because it's like bad stats or it's in a tier slot.
Yeah, dude,
or whatever.
I got my freaking tank trinket from Dawn of Infinite, the cheat death trinket. I got that yoinked today. That felt real bad
Yeah,
because they couldn't trade it.
you know what can you do? It's
I mean,
rough out there.
that's a misplay. That's a misplay by you, Dorky. I'll call it out. So if you're a streamer, ain't no way you did a group of Dawn of the Infinite and didn't have
Bro, it is
a
way
trader in there.
too hard to get.
How do you get somebody who's got
509
two 509
whatever.
trinkets already?
Yeah, that is way too tall a
That's
task.
bro. You
can't be
gotta
done.
be patient. You gotta use your advantage when you can.
There's no,
That's
there's
whatever,
no
I get
way.
next week.
That's
surely.
easy misplay.
It's not possible. It can't be done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will say like one more thing. I mean, just going right back into what I was saying when I was first talking about season 4. The feeling of being able to just do multiple forms of content to get gear, especially like early in the patch, is like such a good thing. I don't know how they can introduce this into a normal season, but like just
Wait.
being able
Can
to
you tell me what you mean? I actually don't know what that means. Like,
like
how are
like
you
we can
doing-
do. So like I did time walking. I did the entire Black Temple raid. It was dropping some goddamn good loot. I was doing a bunch of the world stuff for the Spark. I was doing Dawn of Infinite hard mode. Oh, by the way, the M0 change is so good. I can't emphasize enough on how good
cool.
this whole this is probably the best thing that happened to M Plus in forever. The whole being able to do Dawn of Infinite M0, it's actually challenging, and it gives you extremely good loot. Also, just being able to spam plus 9 keys. Like in a normal season, you would have to spam 15 to 20, right, to get decent loot. But now being able to do like 5 to 9 keys lets
Well,
you
it's the
do
same.
one less affix.
Yeah, except for the
But-
affix being gone is
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice. I'm just doing all these keys without raging. I mean, that kind of says a lot, right? It's like,
Yeah.
all right,
That-
one less
yeah, I was
affix
just about to
suddenly
say
makes
that.
it so much more fun. Like,
It's so
I wonder
weird.
why.
It's so weird how when
it's
we
so
are on
stupid.
PTR and beta or whatever, and there's a vendor where you can add affixes to keys, just everyone universally just fucking doesn't do that.
Well-
Or go ahead.
It's fun as well because you're doing high scaled content without affixes, which you can't do
Yeah,
normally,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Dawn of the Infinite hard mode and also plus 9 keys are much higher scaling than you ever used to be able to do without the garbage third affix or whatever being thrown in there.
Yeah, and even like plus 2s feel so good. Like there's
Yeah.
no affix, but like it's still something, right? And
Yeah.
there are people who are actually kind of struggle with plus 2s right now, but we don't have to deal with
100%.
all the
It's
bullshit
hard.
affixes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just the what do you even call it? Like the scaling right now from like 2 to 10 is it works out so well, especially for majority of the players.
I mean, literally all it does is less affixes at any given key level compared to the previous season. And also, if you were doing 10s or below, you now just do M0s and it's untimed. And, and also you've got
And
Dawn of
it's
the Infinite
rewarding.
hard mode, which is basically an untimed plus 10. Like, hell yeah, that's great.
I'm glad they made that change, but man, if there is not just the more a more obvious sign on the wall that the current affix system does not quite make sense anymore, it is, it just keeps getting brought up. Like, there's just no way that we can continue. If they're not planning on doing an affix rehaul before the War Within, I think they should start doing that. I think it has to happen.
Just think about how much celebration in the streets there would be if they moved Raging from plus 10 to plus 11 this week as well. Like,
Dude, imagine
imagine
if they just
how
moved
good
it
of a
all
change
the way
that
up
would
to
be.
like
Plus 20.
20. What about that? Yeah, like if you were, yeah, you'll get raging if you're doing like some of the highest keys, but like before that, you just don't have to
Yeah.
deal with raging at all.
I mean, yeah.
In fact, like for anyone who's listening right now, like I'm very curious how you guys have been feeling about the whole M plus system changing.
Yeah, that definitely let us know. Right in the comments below. Remember to like and sub while
Yeah,
you're down
dude,
there as well.
there was like a second of a pause, and I was like, "Are we going to hear what they think right now?" They're just gonna like come through the nether.
Yeah, we have a caller on the
That'd be great.
line.
Yeah, Bobby, let's just get them all in here and hear what they have to say.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, I'm glad season 4 is going well then. God, there's been a lot of WoW. There's just been like, if you hold a WoW subscription, it's just been popping. Like stuff has just been popping off for the past like month and a half. It's definitely interesting. I wonder if they're gonna keep this up through the War Within, because it's not even ending, right? Isn't like MoP Remix coming in like a few weeks or something?
Yeah, MoP Remix is like May 17th or something. It's it's here
right away. I thought that was coming in June. Like that from at least their roadmap, it seemed that way.
So, do you guys want to talk about the fact that they announced that the raid schedule was going to be rotating every 2 weeks, and then like 8 hours later they reverted that and they were like, okay, actually it's going to be every 1 week?
Is that a big deal? I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I think I know why they did it.
Do you think it's because like MoP Remix is coming this? I mean, I'm confused because it seems like whatever the reason is, they should have been able to know about it before they posted like the first schedule. So it seems weird to revert it so immediately. I have seen a lot of like negative comments about that decision from them, because a lot of people, at least in my YouTube channel and my Twitter sphere, were very positive about the idea of staying for 2 weeks on each of them initially. And so there's kind of this sentiment of like, everybody liked this, why are you changing it? But I feel like whenever that's true, you got to be thinking like, okay, well, maybe we're in an echo chamber. Like maybe our section of the player base like that, but some other section didn't, right? Because it's not like Blizzard would just announce one thing, get positive feedback on it, and then just decide, you know what, screw that, we're going to do it the other way because it's both harder and going to be less popular. Like they're not.
Yeah, it was universally negative. That like if you read it, wasn't. I mean, maybe we share the same Twitter sphere and everything else you said, but I mean, it was just like, why? There wasn't people that were like, oh, great, you know. But I think I do think the unspoken for majority of people, I think, will kind of enjoy it. And here's why. Well, I guess let's talk about what it solves. So why people wanted the 2 weeks is a lot of people aren't going to clear Mythic Vault this week because our eye level's so low. So they felt like they would just get an extra week at that. And also one of the issues that you heard a lot from guilds and Faded was like, I don't know, we would finish our raid on Monday and be like, hey, Tuesday we're going to finish that boss we were just on. And it's like, okay, well, now it's coming back in 3 weeks. So at least 2 weeks is a more realistic time to do that. I don't think that Blizzard thinks a lot of people are going to be doing Mythic in this. And I think they're doing Heroic. And I think Heroic is very easy. I don't know if you guys have... I've seen a couple Heroic kills, and it looks like it's very, 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 very easy.
Yeah, it was easy.
I think the majority of the player base, they're afraid of this feeling. Number one, a lot of people play the beginning of patches, then every week it just like drops a little bit. People just kind of quit over time. I think they didn't want people to have to wait 4 weeks in a season that already isn't really grabbing you as much as a new season would, to like wait to see the third raid for someone who's like coming back before the War Within, which is like a lot of people are looking forward to. And this is just my argument for what they're thinking, by the way. I don't know if I'm necessarily a fan of this. I just think they wanted people to see the new raid and didn't want them to feel like, oh, it's a new week, I'm looking forward to this new raid, and it's like, oh, it's just Vault again. I think they didn't want that. We never hear that in our echo chamber. I think a lot of players would have maybe been like, oh, I'm going to quit this season because I thought this was going to be this way. And like, I was actually, or not even forget about what you thought it was going to be. It was just like, oh, I don't know. It would be kind of cool if we could do the other raid this week. I don't know why we're raiding another week. Right. So I don't know. That's my best guess.
Yeah, it's definitely, I wonder where they got that. Like, I wonder what caused them to do that reversal in such a short time as well. I wonder what their source of, because like, I agree with you, that seems likely to be the thought process, but then like, how are they not have the decision already made based off that? Where are they learning it in that 6 hours after they announced it before they reverted it? That to me is the mystery, because like, I would love to, if that is somewhere public, Like if there's a forum or something that they're reading or something like that, then I would love
Yeah, they
to
were not
know that because I feel
when
like
they
that,
announced
yeah.
the 2-week thing. There wasn't somewhere where you could go on the forums where people were like, "Boo!"
Right.
People were like universally like, "Yes, good.
Yeah.
This is better than last time." Right? I think here's what happened. So season 4, at least in Shadowlands, I have no idea if this is true now. In Shadowlands, season 4 Faded was developed by a very small amount of people. I don't know if that's true now, but let's just assume it is. Let's say a reasonably small amount of people worked on season 4 in general. Maybe they did that entire announcement. Ian and Morgan are mostly looking at the War Within, and they're just like, "Hey, I have a few issues with it." After they saw, I'm sure they saw the announcement before it got announced and whatever. But like, maybe I don't know if it was feedback, but maybe just like more people got their eyes on it and like had some questions about it, and then they changed it. That's my maybe what it was.
Or maybe they like moved up the Pandaria remix thing, because I feel like that's another thing that would make sense. Is like, hey, we want to have gone through all the raids before Pandaria remix and Cataclysm
Is
Classic
actually
come
true?
out.
Is that how it's
Something
going to
like
work out? Like, if it was 2-week rotations, would they not be done before Pandaria?
It would be on Aberrus still when Pandaria is coming out, I think. Yeah, or like it would be the very first week of the Emergency.
Dude, I bet that's why they did it. I think you're right. That makes way more sense. That makes that just makes way more. Pandaria, this is another thing. We've talked about this last. Pandaria is going to be very popular. Very, 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 very. I think people are going to love that. So having season 4 kind of do everything season 4 is trying to do before people maybe transition into that, which is a very separate thing, is smart, I think.
It kind of overlaps with Cata a bit too, which is like.
I think there's only 1 week of MoP Remix before Cata, right?
Yeah, I wonder if there's like some oversight there.
You can do a lot in 1 week of MoP Remix, to be fair, but yeah, that is super interesting. One week, and then just a lot of WoW happening. If you are someone who plays Classic and retail, they've done a good job of separating everything. Now it's kind of like they're releasing so much content that it's kind of hard to do both, probably.
Yeah, I do kind of feel like it's a blunder to have MoP Remix 1 week before Cata Classic, because I do think there is a large section of the Cata Classic player base that would also play MoP Remix for a while, and the section of those people that only play the game for like an hour a night or something they're gonna be very cross pressured between those two things. But that is just a guess from me. I'm not really involved too much in the Classic community at all. I watch from afar sometimes.
Does MoP Remix last a long time, right?
Yeah, but like if you're somebody who plays Classic as your like main game, but doesn't play it for a huge amount of hours each night, so you're not like done with it fast, right? Like,
yeah, there's a lot to consider.
I think it's going to be like fully overlapping the start of MoP Remix with the start of Cata Classic, and you're gonna have to pick one or the other rather than really being able to do both. Like if you're somebody like you or me that like if we play 8 hours a day in MoP Remix, we'll be done in a week, right? And it'll be fine. We could play Cata Classic as well if we wanted to, but
by the way, I don't think we'd be done in a week. If your goal was to get every cosmetic that they offered, you wouldn't even be close, which is cool, I think.
But yeah, if you wanted to like do all the raids, get 1 or 2 cosmetics you wanted, and like level up a character or two, I don't know.
And then you definitely don't want to be missing on when it's the most hype and when it's the most popular, because when it starts to fall off and it's like, all right, less people to do content with, and it just like overall kind of sucks.
Okay, I want both of you guys to look into your crystal ball for a second. Do you remember that sub chart that came out like a month or two ago? Like we have 7 million subs, and then we got to see the like peaks of like the retail launches, the classic launches, the retail launches, the classic launches. Cata Classic is one that I think people have kind of poo-pooed for a while. They're like, oh man, Wrath is like the most epic time in WoW, and people aren't going to stick by and do Classic. But I'm interested in how many groups that were brought back into the WoW sphere by Classic, Burning Crusade, and Wrath, and how many of them are like, oh fuck it, we didn't keep playing back in the day, maybe we will. What is your all's? How big is that peak going to be on that sub chart? And how popular do you think Cata Classic will be?
Is that the peak after Cata's out or what?
Yeah.
No.
Like the Cata peak compared to the TBC and Wrath peaks, I bet it'll be like almost as good as them. I do think it'll be lower.
That's my guess too, but I don't feel like that's the community sentiment. Do you know what I mean? Like the community sentiment is still like, but I feel like the vibe I'm seeing is if you're in the classic universe now, you're going to continue to play Cata Classic at a large majority, it seems.
I mean, I know some of my guild are like Season of Discovery pilled, and they're gonna just play that, and I don't think they're gonna play Cata. And then, but a few of the classic people in my guild, yeah, they're going like just as hard into Cata as they were into TBC and Wrath. So
I see more of my guild playing Cata than they did Wrath. Significantly.
Although,
Well, but it's kind of hard because like Cata's more retail than it is classic.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's 100% gonna have more retail players playing it. Like I know a lot of retail friends who are playing. In fact, I think Growl's like planning on raiding with a bunch of retail dudes, like a bunch of people in our circle, like Twix, Kimbodi, Evade, all those guys, Psycho, etc. So I actually have no idea. Like I really don't know. I know some of my closer friends want to play Cata, which kind of sucks because like you know how we were talking about MoP overlapping with Cata. That's like the exact situation I have right now. Like I have a bunch of friends who are trying to play retail again. I convinced them to use this whole MoP thing as like a way to return to War Within.
That's
and
smart.
we can like, yeah, like we can all do the MoP stuff together. Like I have a bunch of friends who can like do a 10-man raid, but they also want to do Cata when it comes out. So it's like it's such a shitty time.
Yeah, and if they did it any earlier, it would just do the same thing to season 4. But I think, I mean, I think, I think MoP Remix is going to significantly impact season 4's player base, like at least when it first comes out, like majorly. Maybe less so classic, and maybe that's Blizzard's idea of why that is the way it is. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm just looking at the schedule and like, what are they gonna do in June and July, and that is any like I feel like they're just like spamming us with season 4 MoP and Cata in a month, and then we're gonna do nothing for 3 months or 2 months.
So season 4, there's gonna be more stuff, right? I remember Holly said that.
Yeah, they
there was gonna be
kinda-
more
yeah,
coming
you're right.
I
PvE-wise.
assume that's MoP Remix.
Do we know anything about that?
I think
no. They said something outside of MoP
Yeah,
Remix.
they were specifically mentioning some. Well, okay, they did not specifically say this, but it was heavily implied in the way it was said and what it was responded to that MoP Remix is not the only PvE cook they have before the War Within.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if they've got more stuff for June and July, then it all makes sense. But if not, then it feels like that those months are going to be like it would have made sense to just push Cata Classic back a couple weeks and let MoP Remix breathe for a while. I don't know.
It would have been like Dragonflight, where we
Yeah.
got like an insane amount of content for 1 year and then it just all stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be more season discovery coming to it.
Could be. Yeah, I guess season discovery next phase is going to happen at some point in there.
Well, for what it's worth, too, before we get off class, I'm actually interested in playing Cata Classic. I actually just realized this earlier. I have no idea who I'm going to play with. I haven't done any research into that yet, but I had just for some reason, I really want to play, and I think it's the best spec for this class then, but like Black Arrow Explosive Shot Survival Hunter, which was like one of my favorite specs ever, and I think Cata, that's the play style. And I was like, and Cata's also the first time I got into WoW, and like it was later in the expansion. I didn't do tier 11, but like Firelands Heroic is when I first started like doing my thing. So I do have, for the first time, a WoW Classic expansion I have a bit of nostalgia for. So I'm convincing myself more and more to do it. I don't know if it'll be great stream content, but I think it'd be fun to do.
All right, do we want to move on to War Within Alpha build before we close out here? Because there was a new Alpha build that came out very recently as well that features Fel-scarred Demon Hunter. You guys, both Demon Hunter enjoyers, as am I. Have you gotten a chance to take a look at Fel-scarred?
I did. It seems on the lower end of gameplay feel, like it's not changing a lot of what you're doing. Your buttons light up more because like more things are empowered when you're in meta. I also think it's kind of strange because Havoc and Vengeance both interact with meta differently, right? Like Havoc, it's a cooldown you're planning on using, and outside of Feldev and the I-Beam versions of it, like actually pressing meta is something that you maybe hold on to sometimes as a Vengeance Demon Hunter for certain situations, so you don't like get the benefit of it more. And if it turns into something where you want to use it on cooldown, then that's kind of weird, you know, as like a tank. but they haven't added visuals for it yet. And I think this hero talent could be massively saved by visuals. So, like for example, it turns your eye, like the icons are already in the game, and it's like it turns your eye beam into like this shadow or death icon looking thing, and like the Vengeance Demon Hunter, you have a something called Sigil of Doom. You
Yeah,
know,
all,
just
all
like
the names are completely different.
yeah, all the names are different and the icons are like super crazy different colors. And like if the visuals match that, I could see it being a dub just in that it differs a lot from the ALDRACHI Reaver tree. And I just feel like Demon Hunters above all else. Like if your character looks sick, I think Demon Hunter players care about that a lot. And I think all the hero talents, as we've played with them now, that's such a massive part of it is like the theme and the flavor of being whatever thing you are. Uh, but I still think now that we've seen the Demon Hunter ones, it's at the same time that all of that is great and it could be fixed by visuals. It's kind of hard to just look at Mage and just be like, you know, some classes just get it all, you know.
Dude,
And
freaking mages, man. I mean, those guys always. I mean, they're the main characters of World of Warcraft. Like, what can we say? Obviously, we're gonna get the best stuff.
they
Yeah.
also got a full rework.
Yep.
Fire got like completely remade today, which also I love to see that. I was like a little apprehensive as to like how they were going to handle these alpha builds. And the alpha came out today and it was just like, all right, 1 week later after all of this information dump, here's like 2 more specs that are like completely redone.
It was
right?
4.
So-
It was like Ret, Af, Fire, and Windwalker. Like all got
yeah,
reworked.
major changes to all those, which is like, so they are cooking on the class design side. So if you are passionate about that like I am, I think the next like month or 2 are going to be really, really fun.
Hell yeah. I think also just great changes to all of those specs. Ret is the one that I know the least about, and Af was the one that I was least initially excited about. But after thinking more about the Af one, I'm actually pretty hyped about that too, because they've kind of doubled down on Malefic Rapture, but they've also removed a lot of what made Malefic Rapture focus be so annoying, largely with getting rid of Siphon Life. But they've also added some cool stuff, like Oblivion seems like a really sweet new option for Af. So I don't know. I think it's an exciting time to be a WoW fan if you're following the alpha. It's they're just they're cooking. They're cooking every day, and they've been picking good things to rework. They've been picking good hero talent trees to rework, and they've launched bangers in the hero talent trees, and the more recent ones have had a higher proportion of bangers than the initial ones as well, which that trajectory is really exciting, because I was a little worried that they would have like 5 good ideas, show them at the start, and then a bunch of bland, but it actually turns out they had like 5 kind of first drafts, and then they've gotten better rather than worse at making their hero talents sick since then.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, so I can give you a little bit of insight on the other ones because you said you didn't focus on Ret. They did something so good with Ret. And before we get into Ret, also Monk has just been, this is the first time ever, regardless of Windwalker Monk being good or bad, that if you pay attention to the class, that clearly the person or people who are making changes to it actually get it.
Yeah.
Like, it is the first time the spec has felt understood, from everything from auto attacks to just the way combo strikes interact with your class. Like, it's just obvious that, where before it was obvious that they didn't and have any clue how the spec worked. Now it is obvious that they do, which is really, really cool. But also Ret, like think about Ret. Like Ret has a problem right now where you are a class that has to choose with all of your spenders whether you are AoEing or single targeting. That is like kind of like a super old way of playing WoW. And they're kind of like modernizing that. So like the talents they added today, you said you didn't pay a lot of attention to it.
I looked at the bottom ones, the ones that have like the AoE Templar's Verdicts. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, like so there's like 2 more talents they just added, and they removed a couple of like kind of unfun ones, and it's like dueling between them. So like they want to make Divine Storm be something that will eventually be used on single target with this talent, and like after a certain amount of uses or procs, you actually would press Divine Storm and it would hit harder than a Templar's Verdict potentially. Or the same thing where there's a 40% chance when pressing Divine Storm that your next Templar's Verdict will hit 4 targets. You know, so you're like AoEing, or so your cleave will be crazy with that, right? And Red has always struggled with that. It's always been like we're mass AoEing or we're single targeting. And sometimes you've had to like single target with like 2 or 3 targets because it's the right thing to do and it feels terrible, right? And they're just doing so much. And all of those Templar's Verdict also buff back your Divine Storm from the other thing. So it's like the synergy between using both is so smart and just such a good idea for the spec overall. A bunch of other good changes, but I just wanted to highlight that as something where it's like, okay, they get it. You know, they get why this is a problem.
Yeah, I want to touch on the Demon Hunter stuff too. So like I was actually looking at that and I thought it was cool as hell. But it definitely feels like they've designed Eldrachi Reaver for Havoc
Mhm.
and Fel-scarred specifically for Vengeance. It 100% feels that way. But I will say Fel-scarred seems really cool for Vengeance. I know you said like it doesn't really change gameplay too much, but I think it provides a pretty drastic change to the spec. Because for the longest time, meta has not been too impactful of a button for Vengeance. It's always been like a major defensive cooldown, and that's about it. Like it doesn't really provide too much offensive benefits. Like yeah, you generate more souls. Yeah, you generate more fury. Kind of whatever. But now it feels like it might be a big damn button. It might feel like wings on Paladin, or it might feel like Incarn on Bear Tank, and those are
Hmm.
super impactful. Those feel good to press. Whereas when I press meta normally on Vengeance, I'm like, all right, this is just what I used to live. It's just like another wall. That's about it. But now it's just gonna be so much more
Oh,
epic.
cool.
So that, and I also think the whole class fantasy is super sick. Like I'm just thinking like Illidan, and you're just you're angry, you're a demon, you're powering up, you're fucking Naruto. You've got the beast inside you. You're about to unleash that shit. You know shit's about to go down, and people love that shit when they're playing Demon Hunter. That's what it's all about.
Hmm. Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, especially even on the Havoc side. Like again, the Havoc side doesn't feel great gameplay wise on that new tree, but like if you have like a shadowy red eye beam after you press meta, that's gonna go hard as fuck. It's just gonna be sweet. So, and that's currently what the icon makes it look like it's gonna be. Also, Vengeance, you'll have these red sigil of dooms you're putting down that are probably, like you said, are probably gonna slap. Like they're probably gonna do a lot of damage, right? Um, so yeah, I agree with you. Initially the community sentiment was that this tree is kind of whatever, at least from most people I saw. As I know now was in my chat and he said that, and then a lot of I'm assuming the rest of my chat are just like Havoc Demon Hunters, and they were all like, eh. But I think the visuals,
Oh,
like
screw the Havocs.
one, like one visual, like when the visuals are clearly made for that, and right now they're not at all. Like they're just not added. It doesn't seem awesome, but the visuals could just be so cool.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think we need to rework Aldraki Reaver. That sounds lame as hell. I don't
Yeah.
know about how the community feels about it, but I swear Aldraki Reaver is like the most lame hero talent.
Yeah. It's like it's bad for Vengeance, and I think it's super bad for Havoc because like I think even the Havoc Demon Hunters that are kind of interested in a little bit of kind of a fiddly like piano press in the right order, windwalkery kind of thing. I don't think it accomplishes that for them either. So I think that's pretty high on the list. Like that, Pack Leader, Lightsmith, those are the ones I would put on my rework this list. Although Lightsmith, I played it a little bit and it grew on
No,
me a
no, no,
little
no,
bit.
Jesus
It did a
Christ.
little bit. It was not as bad as I thought it would be. It was. I thought it was going to be real bad, and it was only
Okay,
like
why?
I don't know. It was just like I was like, oh okay, I maybe it was just because I thought it was going to be so bad, right? Like I've
Yeah, expectation.
right, like maybe this was just a case of like the expectations were so low that it overperformed them, but I don't know.
I still think it'll be the most hated, even if it's growing on you, because Holy Paladins are going to have to choose between Herald of the Sun, which is turning them into like a super hot healer again, which is something that a lot of people that I know that play Paladin are like a big fan of. It's just a better WoG that's like Eternal Flame being brought back, right? Like super
Yeah,
cool, as well as a bunch of other stuff in the tree. And then Prod Paladins have to choose between Templar, the most thematic
so good.
paladin thing ever, and it fucking owns it in visuals. It's like a top 3 hero talent in the entire game, like insane. And you're telling me that like either of those specs are going to be like, if they have to play Lightsmith, they're going to lose their mind, and you will never hear it. They're going to complain as much as Moonkins. Like it'll be bad.
Speaking of which, Moonikin's got kind of hard owned in season 4, right? Like they're just Have you guys seen what happened with their set bonus?
Yeah,
it's
Oh,
so
I am
funny.
fully aware of that, man. I've been,
It's
yeah.
so
Blizzard was
mean-
like, "Hey guys, vote on your favorite tier bonus, and we'll buff them and tune them for this season." But like, Druids had convinced themselves that if they chose season 1, Blizzard would make it how it was in season 1 before the nerfs and gave them that free use, and they got like most of the way there. And Blizzard didn't understand that like doing the 75% instead of free just didn't give them the gameplay feel they wanted. So
Well,
they're,
it's also
they're...
it's a DPS loss apparently to upgrade into it off of your old 4-piece.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
apparently.
it is 100%. Dude, I swear to God, the biggest thing I've learned from all of this is that the community only cares about what they think is more powerful.
It's so
They
funny,
don't care
though.
about like feel. They don't care about design. Like people are just idiots. They're all just sheep. They're like, oh, Boom Kit was so good in season 1. Let's just vote on season 1 tier set. And it turns out that it's like you're playing a spec that's feels so much worse. And it not only does it feel worse, but it's straight up just worse because like they straight up didn't even tune it. They didn't even realize what the hell they were voting for.
It did feel better in season 1. Like I know the gameplay of Moonkin stuff when
No. Oh, well,
No, yeah,
okay,
definitely.
maybe overall gameplay, but like this current tier set, well, not current tier set, but like the one from season 3, that one bangs. Like it makes your gameplay so much smoother because like basically it lets you get into clips quicker, right? And if you know anything about Boomkin, it's like you have to double Starfire on single target to get into your single target eclipse. And that's like the worst feeling ever. Like if you're ever doing a boss where there's a lot of movement, you have to like hard cast 2 Starfires. That's like basically you're a fire mage having to hard cast your SKB without shimmer or ice flows, and it stinks ass.
It's just so funny. I don't know. I mean, like, I think they should change it. I think they should buff that set bonus, but it's so funny how it happened.
Yeah, were Moonkins trolled by Blizzard or did Moonkins troll themselves?
Yeah, both, right?
I would say
like,
both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I also think that you mentioned that like people don't care about that. Some people do. You could actually see in the classes that there was like a war going on within the class, not like within a class Discord or like actually, but you could see via the votes and through my stream chat where people would be like, oh man, like these idiots don't understand that like when they bring this back it's gonna suck. Like they're just like you're saying, they're like, oh, they just thought we were good that patch, so they're picking it, and like they don't understand that it's gonna be this. And those people probably feel like they're right because they're like, guys, how could you have done this? And then so many other people were like that, but it was like roughly half and half. Some of those classes were like 50-50 on the tier of people who didn't understand and people who did.
Well, and Moonkin was
I
a
think
close vote.
basically-
It was a close vote, which makes it so much better. It makes it so much funnier.
So much worse, man.
Nah,
Well, you're a
lot of
Moonkin
people.
player.
A lot of people do like to enjoy the downfall of the Moonkin spec.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, yeah,
It's a good time.
I think it's a
Well,
bit of
but
an
the big
overdone
thing is-
bit, but this is just so perfect that I can't help but savor
Dude.
it.
I mean, I think it's just like if people were given the choice, right? Like, would you rather pick strong or would you rather pick better designed? And they will always lean towards strong. It feels like that's just how people play the game. I don't know if it's like how players were conditioned or what.
I mean, well, it depends on the like the kind of player too. Man, I don't know if I want to do a super huge tangent. No, I'm not. We're gonna save it for another episode. I think we're pretty near the end anyway.
Yep, I think it's Patreon question time, which
Well, there's still one more thing to touch on.
it's
The
one more thing to
dungeons.
touch on time, and then it's Patreon question time. What's the
Okay,
one more
what is
thing?
the touch? What are we touching?
The dungeon, alpha dungeons.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
they
good
slap.
call.
You
Yeah,
did, right?
There's
You
Yeah,
did.
I'm
I
surprised
haven't.
you feel
Yeah.
that way. Oh,
Really?
yeah, done the Dratnos. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I mean, I would agree with you for the most part, except for one part, and yeah, I'll let you take a guess at what it was. Like a
Is
part
it
of the dungeon.
Is it the release? Oh, I'm guessing the like train part at the end of the train dungeon where you have to like do that long RP thing with him chasing you.
Close, but yeah, the whole darkness mechanic. Like I get it's kind of cool and all, but oh my god, I don't see
Okay,
this.
I'm
working
glad you
at
brought
all.
this up because this has to do with my tangent.
Good.
So we're going to be
All right.
tangenting.
let's do it.
All right.
Well, this is where I think there is a just massive divide between the popular opinions you see on Twitter and via streams because they just major, especially this is all Mythic Pluser related because they skew high Mythic Pluser, which I want to point out is a monumentally is a horrible adjective, an extremely small version of the community that like looks for these kind of things. And I'll show you one thing that happened on my stream today. Well, I'm not going to show you. I'm going to tell you about something that happened on my stream today that made me realize that so much. So I had a lot of viewers today, and we were doing some alpha dungeons. And first of all, we saw that whole darkness thing, and they could not stop talking about how cool it was. And then there was also something that happened where in that, I think it was the other dungeon, where you like go down one wing and then you go back, and it's like you go in that little mine cart and you click it and it just ports you to the beginning. Did you do that dungeon?
Yeah, I did that one too. Yeah.
So you go through this like mine tunnel and then you get to the end, and clearly Blizzard has designed this way for you to get back to the beginning. Like you enter the dungeon, you can go left or right initially, and then after both of those wings, you have to come back to the center point and then go forward at the end. Exactly. But at the end of each wing, when you finish the boss, you click a little mine cart and you port back to the beginning. And as soon as I saw this, I was thinking, and I said, wow, people are really going to like this, because I bet in a lot of other dungeons they would have had some super long RP, and like people would just complain about how it took.
Or you have forever to like walk all the way back.
Yeah, walking would be horrible, but like let's just say you actually ride in the mine cart there. And then I said that, and then I looked at my chat, and they were all just like, man, like I feel like that totally ruins the fantasy of the place we're in, and it would have been super cool if we just rode in a cart back to the beginning.
There's no way people actually feel that way. No,
this is exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm glad you said that, because I think the majority of people who interact with these dungeons are not going to look at them based on them running them 1,000 times, and the gear that drops from them, and just like the random mechanic that is scaled a little too high, so in an infinite scaling game mode, it's a huge problem on a 27 instead of a 30, as opposed to the other dungeons. And then that can make a dungeon the worst dungeon if you look at Twitter, that's the worst dungeon of all time because of this one infinite scaling mechanic that almost no Mythic Plusers or dungeon doers ever see. And I think that if you look at the way that most people interact with dungeons, they want that theme and that feel of a dungeon. I think that's the average WoW player. I don't think they're looking at it as like, how is this going to feel 1,000 times later? 1,000 is extreme, like 100 times later. And I think the disconnect between that and how dungeons are made is what I kind of wanted to talk about, because I think that Blizzard cares so much more about that feeling. You mentioned the light and the dark, the kobold, the candle mechanic, and maybe how annoying the end of that dungeon is when you're riding in the cart and like throwing dynamite at the darkness that's this big shadowy last boss that's trying to get you. And I could already see people being like, like you and people who watch your stream and high Mythic Plusers in general just being like, oh yuck, this is like so much stuff you have to do and it's so corny. And I could just see the average War Within player doing that dungeon and thinking it's the fucking coolest thing ever and the most memorable dungeon for them in the entire expansion, both in their leveling path and whenever they do it in Mythic Plus, whether they dabble in it or go to get the portals or whatever. And I just think the disconnect and the difference in opinion between those two crowds is massive, and something you probably never hear in your stream chat, because your stream is pretty heavily geared towards what you do mainly.
Oh no, 100% hear that.
And something that I have seen more.
Yeah. So that is actually a lot to digest there. So first of all, I don't think it's like specifically a high key thing. Like I know, like it feels like it's like a high key or like Twitch community or Twitter community. I think it's like specifically M+. Like a lot of these things don't belong in M+. And Blizzard is like fully aware of this. Like I know Blizzard actually loves all this stuff. We've seen it before with like I Am God King Skullvault or the boat ride in Court of Stars, or most recently the Dawn of an Infinite. So I was actually doing Dawn of Infinite hard mode, and I completely forgot about just how awful all the super long RP is in Dawn of the Infinite, because we're doing it in hard mode, and it's like the original version where you don't have all the Mythic Plus mechanics. You have like giga long RP.
Did they cut out RP for the Mythic Plus version?
Yeah,
of
they like
there's a lot less RP in M+.
Like it's
interesting.
Like
I didn't know that.
Less of RP. Yeah, so like I think that's where you're saying like the disconnect is, but I think it's like rightfully needed, and Blizzard's aware of that. At least it feels like they've started to become aware of that. Like they may not have been in the past, but they want 100% try to like avoid these. What would you even call them? Like dungeon fantasy stuff in Mythic Plus, because like Mythic Plus is literally designed to be replayed. Like, obviously, it's fine if you have these gimmicky stuff in non-Mythic Plus environment. Like if you're just doing M0 or whatever, heroic, I think it's like great and it's actually really cool. In fact, I get it all the time. Like sometimes people are just like in my chat whenever I'm complaining about like, oh, but here we go again, Halls of Valor, God King Skovald. But a lot of people are actually like, oh, you know, like I love that shit. Like it's cool as hell. It feels very reminiscent of Legion whenever they hear Skovald saying his line. And but yeah, I mean, I just don't think a lot of these types of stuff belong in Mythic Plus.
Well, one more thing. I want to have Dratnos respond because I know you look like you had an answer, but I just wanted to point out, you mentioned that like it doesn't belong in Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus is designed to be repeated. I think most people's experience with Mythic Plus is like at the most doing them on a 20 and then they stop. Like the vast
Yeah, but even
majority.
then, like you're still doing it at least a dozen times, if not more.
Do you think that people who are going up and doing these things on 20 are part of the brigade that are
100%.
constantly complaining about how annoying God King Skovald's RP is? Because I don't think they care at
100%.
all.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure they care less, but you'll 100%. It was like, you know, you hear this all the time. Like people are like, oh, Toll the Gore again, or like Siege of Borealis. Like anytime one of these types of dungeons or scenarios come up where there's some gimmick or RP, it's like vastly disliked.
I think
I'm not
gimmick
just
for
saying like
sure. I would agree
from
with you on gimmick. I don't think they give a fuck about RP. Like 2 minutes.
okay, well, I mean, it depends on how egregious it is, because like you know, the Dawn of Infinite one was like truly egregious. But obviously, if it's just like something small, they don't care as much. Otherwise, like I don't think they would have actually made changes. Like if you ask me, I don't think Blizzard would have given a fuck if it's not a problem. But like they've clearly made these changes in Dragonflight, a lot of them actually.
Yeah.
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 I think that first of all, like they have done it. It was Uldaman as well, right? Uldaman, the end of the dungeon, has a RP segment while you're waiting
Oh,
for
yeah.
mobs to spawn that doesn't exist in M plus. I think that moving M plus to a higher level of difficulty and having M0 exist at a higher level of difficulty now as well, but untimed, lets them do that as well. Like I think they can have the RP in the M0 and then just take it out in M plus, and I think pretty much everybody's happy in that case. It depends on the type of RP as well. I will say, like, I think that if you're waiting for people to talk and you're standing there, I think that gets a lower approval rating among casual M plus players than like, oh, it's a boat ride that we're going on, right?
Yeah.
I
I think
think-
we enjoy the boat ride. Yeah.
I think also it matters whether it's at the start of the dungeon or the end of the dungeon. God King Skovald was so frustrating because you were looking at your timer, and if the timer was
yeah.
close, you were 3 minutes off the
Yep.
timer or whatever, or you know, 6 minutes, right? Because there were
You're
two
like,
bosses
come
left,
on, just
and you were like,
spawn
come on,
already.
right? Like same with Dawn of the Infinite. If there was Dawn of the Infinite RP before the last bosses, which there's a lot of before both of the last bosses in M0, that would be giga frustrating because you're looking at that timer countdown. But Court of Stars having a 50-second boat ride is right at the start of the dungeon, so you're not seeing that, you're not feeling that time pressure. So I think that also has a great deal to do with the approval rating of RP among the people that are like between us and the people who only do M0, right? Like people who do +2s to +7s, they do a couple keys a season, they do a couple keys a week even, but they're doing, you know, they're not like capping their keys. They're not.
Dude, I don't even
on
know
that
if they
level.
do like Mythic. Like,
Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna make this up. This might be true. But I think it's true. The majority of people, like if you were to look at all of WoW subscribers, everyone that plays the War Within, the majority of them, or the majority of, let's just say the majority of them, the majority of dungeons that they will remember are their dungeons from their leveling experience.
Yeah, I think that
Like,
is likely to be true.
so-
Or the
so-
M0s as well, the heroic dungeons at max level, the, you know, the time
correct.
walking that they do
Yeah,
with their
but
friends
like
at max
not
level.
Mythic Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, like not Mythic Plus. Like I think Mythic
Yeah.
Plus is the vast minority of dungeon exposure and what they think. So you can have all those cool things in the dungeon where people remember them. Like I remember being like more of a noob in Cata, and like I remember those Cataclysm dungeons like crazy, and it had nothing to do with replaying them. There was no Mythic Plus back then. There was no challenge modes. Like it was just like I will remember those dungeons forever, you know. And I think that matters so much to Blizzard and how people they want these to be so deeply thematic that you'll remember this forever. And I think that is what they have achieved so far with the 4 dungeons we've seen. Actually, the Rookery is kind of like whatever, but I think like the B one,
100%.
I mean, that dungeon's insane. Also, I think that's going to be a good Mythic Plus dungeon, and
100%.
it's also has all the things that are good about Mythic Plus, but it's also just so cool. And the both of the ones I did today were so cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I really like how trash dense a lot of these dungeons are. That's like by far the biggest thing I've noticed. Like whatever dungeon it was, all 4 of the dungeons, they were trash dense, which felt pretty good. But I'm still gonna say it, man. That whole darkness gimmick was like so anti-fun, and it going into M plus is 100% gonna suck ass. Just from like the first look at it, I was doing it with Evade, and he was like, "Dude, this shit fucking sucks," because he was trying Afflock, right? The new Afflock, and for casters, it's extra miserable.
You just
Like,
have to
you're, like,
stand
trying
next to the
fo-
candle, yeah.
Yeah, like you're following, well, because you're having to like follow it along, and then like you're having to do damage, and then it's just like mobs trickling in one at a time rather than like fighting pack by pack. Because normally whenever it's those types of damage encounters, it feels really bad to play for a lot of specs. Like anytime you have that, there are very little specs that do those types of encounters well.
It's also really long. There's a lot of mobs
yeah,
you
it
run
was
into. Like it could
Yeah, it was, like,
be
a large part of
half
the
that
dungeon.
duration, or in Mythic Plus specifically, or they could just make the mobs work differently there, where like your cart runs into like 3 packs and then it's over, right? And you could still have to do that. You probably make the candle aura thing you get a little bigger too, so you don't have to be like right on the cart and constantly moving. But I think if you were to again look at this is why this exists, and hopefully they do make it better in Mythic Plus, but like I think people are going to do that, and that will be one of their most fond dungeon memories of the War Within. So like just again, like I think that is something where like doing it over and over again is going to suck, but people doing it one time is going to be like, this is really cool and different. I think the closest thing it feels like is like kind of like that Lich King dungeon. Do you know when like Lich King is chasing you and you have to like kill those things like that? The dungeon gave me that feeling, and I think people are gonna really like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because like whenever we say majority of people like that, like yeah, it's probably gonna be like a lot of people who do enjoy it. But for the people who are actually passionate about playing the game, like people who like I'm not even like M plus doers, right? Like people who just like play the game a lot, right? I'm sure they'll do the dungeon a lot, and it just feels like something that's gonna be very disliked, just because of like how
I would agree with
annoying
you.
it is to play.
I mean, if you ported that into Mythic Plus, it would be the thing you looked forward to the least about the dungeon. But I think it is the thing while doing the dungeon for the first time would be the most memorable and distinct.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the raid equivalent of that is, it feels like you're doing Sylvanas, and Sylvanas was just awful. Like like having to like do the
It
whole
feels worse than
intermission.
Sylvanas. It feels It feels like
Yeah, it feels like a
Sylvanas,
worse version of
but there's like
Sylvanas.
a 5-yard light thing on the ground that you have to follow slowly, and if you're out of it, you do literally 0 damage. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
and then
it's
there's
like
like all
Evil's.
that downtime in between and stuff. Like it just doesn't really play too well. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it was cool as fuck.
Dude,
I enjoyed
Dratnos'
everything else.
face is like, let's go to the Patreon
Guys,
question.
guys, we have to do the
Dude,
Patreon
Dranos.
question.
Oh yeah, we gotta
You
go.
guys.
It is like,
It
It's-
is
it's
1 in the
1
Dranos probably
a.m.
doesn't even know what the hell we're
Pacific
talking
time.
about because he hasn't even done it yet.
That's also true. I'm like, yep. Mhm.
Wait, you haven't done it? Oh,
No, I haven't
man.
done the 2 new dungeons. I need to do
Okay.
this.
Yeah, let me
I
know
think
how
they're
you feel
great.
about it when
Oh,
you do it.
one more thing before the Patreon question. This
Okay, yeah, well, we're
I'm going to kill you.
requires 0 elaboration, but I think
Alright.
Hallowfall is the best looking zone that has ever existed in World of Warcraft.
Okay, I have no idea what you said.
I flew into it today on alpha, and like you get kicked out after 10 seconds, but just the silhouette of it when you first get in there is absolutely insane. Anyways,
Dorky,
that's
what
it.
do you have to say
Hallowfall.
about
Yeah, you know about
that?
that,
Yeah.
right, Dranos?
Hello,
Yeah, like,
I've seen some
Hallowfall.
pictures of it. Yeah, you can like I have Kilrog
yeah.
in there and look around a bit if you want. So looks pretty
Okay.
cool.
That is all.
Yeah, sounds cool.
All right. Before we go on to the Patreon question, anybody have any other tangents that we'd like to get to?
Okay, just
Oh yeah,
just-
hold on. Let
just
me talk
go-
about.
Dude,
There
let's
you go.
let's talk about affixes again. Let's
Yeah.
just get
Yeah,
into
yeah.
it.
Let's
What do you guys
talk
think about
defensives.
Tyrannical? How
Season
has
of-
Tyrannical felt this week?
Okay, but they need to do something about defensives. Like we got to get that out of the way.
That's true. That's true.
Oh yeah, we did
How
say
did
we
they
were
not
gonna.
nerf fire mage defensives?
We said
when
we
they
were
did
gonna
the whole-
pod about defensive removal, and that is the main idea of our pod for until they change it.
How about Augmentation Evoker? How's everybody feeling that has been going so far?
I feel like that's been buried, man. We haven't talked about
Okay,
augmentation in a hot minute. Nobody
unironically,
talks about
though,
it anymore.
no one even mentions it anymore, and it's almost accepted that logs just completely are fucked, and they have been for 6 months. And what are we doing with that?
Dude,
Leads
if
us
you ask
perfectly
me,
into our Patreon question.
I would say, no, hold on, before we go to the Patreon question, I would say logs have been fucked since Legion, okay? I swear to God, ever since they introduced
This is good.
PI, like class buffs and all that stuff, like I have not given a fuck about logs in
Bro,
forever.
it's so
Not a
beyond
lot of
worse
people.
than that, though. But yeah.
Yeah, I know it's worse for sure, but like I'm just saying, like it's been going down.
All right, we're gonna do the
upwards
Patreon
since
question
then.
right now. No other talking
Unironically,
until-
this
Yeah.
is
relevant,
this is
though.
something that's relevant to the Patreon question, which so
okay.
this one comes from definitely not an Ellie Shaman main that says, "Do we actually know how powerful class contributions really are?" I've had an interesting
buff.
discussion with my partner, Sick Flex, who is an avid and accomplished Final Fantasy XIV player the other day, about how logs work differently between the games. Specifically, Final Fantasy logs have two metrics of DPS. One is your overall DPS minus everything you got from other people's buffs, and the other is your personal DPS plus whatever damage you generated by buffing others minus what you got from other people's buffs. So pretty much your net contribution. The technical issues with log hooks notwithstanding, I feel it would be very interesting, if disruptive, if WoW had the same possibilities. Blizzard has explicitly said they don't tune around raid buffs. Has it explicitly said that? And apart from Augmentation Evokers, there generally isn't a lot of skill expression in the ways that WoW lets you give damage to other players because it's mostly via raid buffs, but I think having the data visualized would be important for the ongoing discussion about raid buffs and raid utility. To put this into perspective, classes like mages, druids, and demon hunters would likely have their bars and Warcraft logs grow 40% or more beyond classes with lesser raid buffs like hunter and monk, or the few lone DPS specs with no contribution to raid damage beyond their own output. I realize having this data visualized or accessible would probably create a rather volatile reaction with the way community perception of class power works, but the resources of utility, damage, survivability, and being mandatory for an optimal raid setup have become increasingly skewed in their distribution, where it's basically the rich get richer looking at you, mage. This is especially jarring
amen.
because Blizzard has fairly openly said that classes with higher population get more attention, which of course leads to a vicious cycle. I think having a transparent idea of what different classes actually bring numerically could be an interesting data point if you're thinking about redistributing power levels and raid utility, the necessity of which is a fairly common consensus at this point, I believe. Should Warcraft logs look into moving into more of a net contribution model like Final Fantasy, or would it expose how much more some classes bring to raid than others? I mean, we've seen this a little bit. We saw when Spell Reflection got added to details that
I was gonna say exactly that.
as soon as they did
Yep.
that, man, the Spell Reflect at the start of Underrock got nerfed by like 400% or something. Just
And
like
ever since
immediately.
Fatbase started to remove all spell reflects, like that,
Yeah,
that
like-
was the beginning of the end for spell reflect.
Because before that, yeah, I mean, and I think it's
Yeah.
definitely true. Like if this was shown on logs, the first Demon Hunter in your raid would actually be doing,
Billions
twice
of
as much
damage.
as anybody else in your raid.
Oh,
It
probably
is a little
more.
bit weird in WoW because, if you have two Demon Hunters, what do you just have the damage of Chaos Brand and give it to each of them? Do you be like, oh man, the only way I can get my rank 1 parse is if I'm the only Demon Hunter in this raid? It's a little bit like tougher to do than but I guess you could just do that. I don't know. It's weird.
I think the bigger point of the question was more along the lines of like, is it a problem when certain things are providing this much?
Certainly, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that it is.
Well, the
Okay.
TLDR was, do we actually know how powerful class contributions really are? And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
we
'Cause,
know.
like I would say, yeah, like we know, like like amongst the high end players, like everyone kind of knows how broken Chaos Brand is, or like Spell Reflect in the case of Warrior. But
Frank is going to put up right now how far you have to go down in the Fire Act kills to find the first group without a Demon Hunter. He's going to look through the kills and he's going to find the
dude, I wonder if
highest
there is
kill
even is any.
that didn't have a Demon Hunter in it.
He also loves doing stuff like this.
Yeah. And he'll do
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
he
for
loves that.
Mage and Warrior and Monk and all that stuff. So all those stats
Yeah,
are
he'll do it
available
all.
now. And you can see that it's everybody knows how powerful these classes are, and we're playing with them throughout the high ends. It's not a secret. It's just, it doesn't show up on the damage statistics. Yeah.
No, I will say for sure though, like visualizing it makes it so much bigger. Like it gives a much better perspective for players who don't understand. And when a majority of players see this, they're gonna lose their minds.
Maybe
Just
it'd be
like the
good
spell
for
reflect thing.
Blizzard. It'd be good for Blizzard to also know to maybe balance the raid buffs more. But this is not really a problem in raid. It's more of a Mythic Plus issue because if you think about it, actually, you mentioned Final Fantasy. So the thing Final Fantasy does is if you bring two of the same spec, well, they call them jobs in that game, to like a raid, you like
That's just
don't
so
get
silly.
a certain buff. So like that's how they force class diversity. As much as I would like raid buffs gone, if the raid buffs were gone in WoW, your raid comps would just be like 5 and 6 of a few different things, and I think that would be problematic in its own way. One thing raid buffs do in WoW is they have that. That's how WoW has tackled forced diversity while also giving you theme. They think it's cool that druids have Mark of the Wild again and all these thematic old spells, and I don't think it's a coincidence they brought them back when Classic was trying to get people back into retail because it's something else they can relate to that they used to have back in the day. That now how that impacts Mythic Plus is totally different. So in a raid, how like why these things aren't shown on details or why these things aren't shown on logs is because it doesn't really matter. They're all exactly good enough or at least good enough to where you bring one of these classes because of it. And if that's true in raid, the solution to the problem was correct or good. It solved it sorry, the effect they got the effect out of it they wanted. In dungeons, this is not true. In dungeons, there's only 5 spots, and now it's like you're weighing, oh, well, which is the best group buff, and how powerful are they against each other? Anyone in this call will be lying to you if they said anything other than certain raid buffs have defined the meta in Mythic Plus for this entire expansion. And with the removal of like buff tomes, you just have kind of brought certain classes, like especially I think Druid, like you just always find a way to bring a Druid because Mark of the Wild is just insane, you know. And even if they nerfed it, if you want to make the argument for nerfing it, you would still bring Mark of the Wild to the raid all the time, and it would just maybe be less broken in dungeons, right? So maybe balancing them is smart. And sorry to you, the Patreon question was from, and I quote, definitely not an Ellie Shaman main, which probably prompts them. It's still insane that they went through this expansion giving every single class a raid buff except for literally that spec and Resto. Also, another thing in Final Fantasy you mentioned. The reason that you can see it on logs in Final Fantasy is because that game is much more simple. Everything is potency based, and when you have like a classic dancer job, like dancer, something like that, it's all very easily attributable in logs. Where like think of something like PI, like just how could you possibly equate in logs how much damage you're gaining from a haste buff, you know, stuff like that. But Blizzard cares more about the theme than stuff like that. That's like a little bit more of a departure from raid buffs, but. I think Blizzard explicitly and you they mentioned in the thing they said Blizzard explicitly said they don't tune around raid buffs, and you said, "Are you sure about that?" They definitely don't tune for them, right? Then if that was the case, then Havoc would be horrible because they would be tuning them to make up for the fact that they're giving you Chaos Brand.
Yeah, it
That's
depends on what you mean by
that.
tuning around it. Yeah, like they do not own a class because it has a like they don't make Ellie Shaman do 50% more damage than everything else so that you would have them in your raid or anything like that. But they do say they like consider it and they think about it.
Yeah, and they should do that because if Ellie Shaman isn't the best DPS in the game, why would you ever bring it? It doesn't bring other stuff. But yeah, but also like I don't think they tune with it ever. Like I don't think they tune a single class in this game and they're like, oh, this thing has arcane intellect, so we're gonna change the way it's tuned. I don't think they've ever done that. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely I think it's a way bigger problem in Mythic Plus and maybe like some smaller group size heroic raids, but heroic is not content where this is straight from Ian where he said you don't need raid buffs to do heroic. That is pretty true as well. So for whatever it's worth, it's like Mythic where he says, oh, well, like you are expected to have these things to force class diversity. Well, that's the reason. So I would give it to Dorki, I think, because I think this is definitely a more Mythic Plus based. Raid buffs are a significantly bigger problem in Mythic Plus than Raid, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is massively a problem. I mean, not just the buffs, but like this person also touched on the point of utility because think about it, like them not tuning around utility too is massive, and Vengeance Team Hunter is like the biggest example of that right now. Obviously, there are many other specs or classes that suffer from this. Vengeance amongst many of them, mages, for example. These classes just bring so much on top of having normal tuning, if not above average tuning. And you can't like really under tune these specs too. Like think about how bad that would feel. It's like, all right, because you bring two silent sigils and two of all these different sigils.
Yeah, you do no damage.
You do no damage, or you're less tanky. That would make kind of sense, right? Like
damage. Well, damage is king though. That's the thing. Like, imagine if like your class is a bunch of utility, like a mage, and it's like, okay, mages, well, you just don't do good damage as expansion because you have all of this. Mages would hate that. Damage. Let's all not kid ourselves. Damage is by far the most important thing, or throughput of anything. Like healers would be healing. Like,
well, hold on, but what do you mean by important? Like important to the player or important to
what people
bringing-
actually care about. I think people would
Okay, yeah,
rather
sure, yeah.
be the highest DPS class in the game than have any extra advantage utility defensive wise. That's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. But on the other hand, even it would make more sense for a spec like Vengeance to either do less damage or be less survivable because they bring all this utility. But that's never going to be accounted for. Like Blizzard's not looking at that and being like, all right,
Yeah.
they do this, therefore we make them weaker. And yeah, I mean, like in M plus specifically, it's a massive problem just because like utility is so much harder to balance in M plus.
Yeah, I
And we've
actually think the
mentioned
raid
the whole-
buffs, like the damage raid buffs, I think are fine in M plus. It's the main
I wouldn't
problem
say
is just
fine,
the
but they're
defensive
more
value.
okay.
What do you mean
Yeah.
by that? What are damage raid buffs?
Like Battle Shout, Arcane Intellect, Mystic Touch, Chaos Brand. I
Okay.
think those are mostly chill in M plus. For like, I mean, you don't need them. You play them when the specs are good, right? And they're like a little tiebreaker sometimes. But for me, it's like Mark of the Wild, Powered Fortitude. Those are the two where it's like, oh man, that's +1 key level I can do.
Yeah.
But that's like a very high
Yeah.
end thing. That's only relevant when you're in, pushing.
Yeah, an extremely
one-shot
small
AT.
percentage of the Mythic
Right.
Plus player
I think,
base.
I think for the vast majority of the Mythic Plus player base, those ones are fine too.
Yeah, correct. But like, I don't want to go super big into the cook. It makes me think before about how you cap the defensiveness at a certain point,
Yeah.
and have that not scale out of control, but have the damage you need to do, and then they would almost flip that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Although even then, like Chaos Brand and M plus, right? If I'm a Havoc Demon Hunter at M plus, I'm contributing like 25% of my group's damage or 30% of my group's damage. And so Chaos Brand giving a 5% magic damage increase, that's what, 4% more damage for like 3 people, for 4 people. That's a much smaller chunk than if I'm in a raid where I'm only 7% of the raid's damage, and then I'm increasing everybody's damage. Like I'm contributing another 4% of the raid's damage for my Chaos Brand, right? Like that's fundamentally, it's always going to be a smaller percentage increase on a raid buff like that in 5-player content versus 20.
I mean, that is a good point though, because like it's kind of unfair that there are more sources of magic damage than physical damage.
Yeah, I mean, Chaos Brand is way better
That's
than
definitely
Mystic Touch.
something they
Yeah.
should try to address, even if it's not like even if the point is like, all right, you're always gonna have one Havoc and you're always gonna have a Mage, so it's like it's kind of whatever in raid. I do feel like the raid buffs should be a little bit more balanced across the board, where Market Wild shouldn't be as impactful just because everyone gets buffed by it, and conversely, Battle Shout, or not, maybe not Battle Shout, but like,
I mean, there have been
What would
some
be the
tiers where
weakest
you
buff?
literally could cut your Battle Shout and your Mystic Touch and not lose much damage, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, because
Especially
like, yeah, like,
now.
yeah.
Like they,
yeah, like
they
those
removed,
need to be more impactful.
They removed the avoidance thing and the leech thing and the increased healing taken by monks. So now monks only have 5% physical damage done, which is like easily the worst raid buff. Like you could
Wow.
sit that easily.
Blessing of the Bronze has entered the.
Oh yeah, but they have enough other things where it's like you'll always want this. But yeah, you're right. Blessing of the Bronze is definitely worse. There was something I was thinking about too with I think you mentioned Mark of the Wild. I think it's simple. Raid buffs in their own words, basically. Actually, I mean they've said this to me as well. They exist to force class diversity, and I think I know what the alternative would look like, and I think that makes sense. But if you should basically make these raid buffs as good as they need to be to make you bring that class, and then like no better.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
That's like,
Like
hit
Chaos
that line.
Brand, if you
Chaos Brand
if you
with
nerf Chaos
1% would
Brand
do
to
that.
1%,
Yeah.
you would still bring a Demon Hunter, right? Like there's no reason you wouldn't. Or if you nerfed Mark of the Wild to 1%, like it would still be extremely valuable, but it's just not as impactful as it is currently.
Yeah, so easy, and then because that will reduce the impact you have on the dungeon environment. Where I think in raids right now Whether Mark of the Wild is 5%, 1%, 3%, you just bring a druid, right? Okay, that and that is the effect they want, but it's just too strong individually in a dungeon small group scenario.
Okay, would that have the effect of if I mouse over Chaos Brand in my spellbook and it says 1% increased magic damage, and I'm like a casual player, am I reading that and being like, what is the point of this, right? Like that's
not really.
verging
there
on
are
the
like
levels
bunch
of those.
things.
That's verging on
yeah,
the
but
levels
there
of
are a
those
bunch of
little
things like
those
that.
little Diablo charms you got during the Diablo event, where it's like +2 armor.
Oh, but it's
or
like
whatever.
ratios too, like right? Like you just have random ratios that just like increase 2% critical damage. I don't
Yeah.
think.
I
people
think it's
really
kind of right. I mean,
mind them.
some people don't even do like group content, right? So they'd just be like, okay, cool, I do 1% more magic damage. Sweet, my
Yeah,
Chaos
it's like
Brand
worth
is
the
epic.
passive. Yeah.
Yeah, is this worth even? Why is this even in my spellbook, man? You know,
Like
can
I
see that.
agree that it would do the right things mechanically,
us,
but
yeah.
I think that it would maybe be too small of an impact for like people to understand. I don't know.
No, I feel like there's no way people care about passives like that because it's just kind of like you're just giving it. And that's how I see ratios. Like I don't see people complain about ratios, right?
Yeah. People complain about Goblin Rocket Barrage. You guys ever see people complain? I think Goblin Rocket Barrage is silly as well. Like it does like 2,000 damage or something.
Does it share a cooldown with Rocket Jump?
It does, and it's on the global, I think.
Yeah, so that's why you don't hear anyone talk about it, because Goblin Jump is sweet.
Yeah,
So-
Goblin Jump is.
Yeah, Goblin Jump's extremely good. I'm also interested in how the Earthen racial is going to play out. Did you guys see they made it like an empowered cast?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sick. I think
too.
Earthen looks really cool. I don't know. I like all the racials except for like Stoneform, Shadow Meld. Yeah, those two. Stoneform, Shadow Meld, Fireblood, I guess.
Dude, it's surprising if you haven't done anything about them yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, racials are, well, again, this is like if you were someone like me, and I think a lot of you too as well, where it's like gameplay is by far the most important thing. I think like they care way more about the theme of a racial. Like I think they care more about like someone has always been a Tauren, and of course they have War Stomp, right? Wouldn't make
Well, it feels
sense.
like it's an
for-
easy fix though, right?
What's the fix?
Well, just like either make it not work on certain things or straight up disable it in certain content.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
then my race
Yeah,
doesn't
like
work.
Shadow Meld.
Why doesn't my race
like
work?
why does first of all why does Shadow Meld work in dungeons? It doesn't work in raid. It hasn't worked in raid in years. It literally
Or like why does
can't
it
work.
even drop certain abilities, right? Like is that hard to fix? I don't actually know, but
I mean,
it feels like it's got to be a simple solution. Right?
Like the people who really care about Shadow Meld are going to be like killing a spider out in the open world, and they're just going to be like, "Oop, you can't see me," and then they're just invisible, and that's it. And they've done their
Yeah,
thing.
but just
right?
let them have their fun.
Shadow Meld has served its purpose.
but it would be jarring. Like, oh, I press this button that puts me in stealth, and it didn't change what the mobs do. Like, I agree they should do that, but
I'm
Well, I mean,
responding
but like
more.
but none of them are gonna be like, all right, I know this is gonna make this mechanic not work.
yeah,
I've just heard some takes in my echo chamber where they're like racials should just like you should just have a racial talent selector at the bottom of your talent thing, and like your race is cosmetic only, which I actually can fuck with the cosmetic only thing, but because like I feel like people just kind of want to look a certain way rather than
I'd be down for
having
that. I'd be
power.
so happy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah,
exactly
but like,
why though.
but yeah, but that's why it'll never happen though, because like it's important for Blizzard that you're a night elf and have Shadow Meld.
Yeah.
Because it's just what you get by being a night elf, and they care.
No,
so
but at the
much
same
more about
time,
that.
for these players, like it's important for them that they play whatever character they find looks cool, but they feel compelled to play something else because it
Well,
brings that
we
much
do
more power.
that, right? Like, we feel
Yeah.
compelled to play Night Elves and Dwarves because they have Shadow Meld, and if we wish that we were a cool-looking Draenei or whatever, tough luck, right? But, like, they...
I mean, for me specifically, I don't care about how I look, but for I'm just saying, like for like like Megaset was one of them, right? Like I know Megaset, she loves how her character looks, and she hates the idea that like, oh, I have to be a dwarf or I have to be a night elf.
Yeah, I mean, I hate my dwarf characters being dwarves, but
Yes, same.
not as much as I like
Yeah,
having
but some people
Stoneform.
might. Like, for example, imagine you're just. I mean, isn't there like a WoW creator that like literally cosplays as dwarves on stream like all the time?
I think
Like,
so, yeah.
the Gen Eric Live, right?
I'm pretty
Little
sure
shout
that-
out to them.
Yeah. I've seen
Well,
the tweets, yeah.
Like, I just think for people like that, or people who just in general are like super into the race that they're playing, like it would just be weird if a Dracthyr could just stone form. Like, it just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to them. And I think Blizzard cares more about that, and Blizzard's majority of their player base cares more about that than the other thing. But man, would it be nice to not worry about power between races, and you could just look like the race you wanted to be. It's almost like serving the same thing. It's just different. I don't know.
It's almost like the whole Covenant argument.
Yeah.
Where,
It's
like, when
it's
you're
similar to
tying
that,
power
but
into
it's
it.
hitting a much smaller fraction of the player base, right? Because like to be doing the kind of content where having Stoneform or Shadow Meld matters to you, you have to be doing much higher level content than to be doing the kind of content where like
Right.
Meatball versus Soul Rot, you could feel the difference, right?
I mean,
so
honestly, I think a lot of those people also find it weird. Like, I was the biggest advocate ever for cross faction gameplay, but I think there's a lot of WoW fans that just like that'll never sit right with them because it's just like that's not what WoW is. Just the same way that like Stoneform exists on a dwarf, the Horde and Alliance are against each other. Even though every patch for like 20 years we team up and beat somebody and then go back to fighting each other again, and that probably doesn't make sense after a certain amount of time. But you know, like I kind of get it. You know, it's like WoW is exudes a certain feeling from you. It has some certain rules to it, and when those rules erode away for the sake of what needed to happen with cross faction, I can just understand why some people are resistant to it.
Oh, dude, this kind of reminds me of so there's been some tweets like showing off how cool Ride of the Apocalypse is in open world content where you can just like be
Yeah,
in
it's
mounted combat.
insane.
Yeah, and then they should, you know, like obviously there were like a lot of responses that were like, what the fuck? Like, is this what retail WoW has become? You can just like now do mounted combat. Like, granted, a lot of these people don't understand that. Like, it's only doable in the open world, but like to a lot of these guys, it's like super jarring that like you can suddenly just be on a mount and attack stuff.
It is really cool.
it's so
by the
cool,
way.
yeah.
It's really cool. It's like objectively cool. Maybe one problem is, and I don't know if this is a problem, that DKs are definitely going to level faster than everyone else. Like, I don't know how anything can compete with that. But who cares, kind of.
Yeah, it's sick. I don't know. I mean, instant cast flight form, dragon riding capable, also pretty good. Pretty good for getting around. But yeah, I mean, it's so cool. But the reason it's cool is because it's breaking a rule that the game has had for 20 years, right? Like, that's
Also,
part
I
of
mean,
what
it just
makes
kind of looks cool. Like, I don't know, like some MMO or just maybe RPG aspect in general of like just being mounted in combat. Like, you just like remember cool scenes from movies like that, and it just kind of looks sick. I think that's part of it too, rather than just the gameplay. It is definitely breaking a rule. Man, does it feel like it's breaking a rule. You know what else feels like it's breaking a rule? That DKs have just been like the slowest class in the game for 10 years, and now the other choice node when you're not outside is you gain your Death's Advance still does everything it normally does, but it's also just a Paladin Divine Steed, but it lasts 10 seconds and
Yeah,
you
but
have
you're
two
just way
charges
cooler
of-
than Paladin.
Yeah.
Paladins are lame.
Yeah.
True, and it lasts 10 seconds. That is going to be insane in raid combat. I can't believe that exists. Like,
I mean,
not
Death's
saying they should
Advance,
remove
this
it either.
expansion was literally already so sick, right? Like,
Max
you
is
do
getting
Razageth
nerfed
again,
from
you have
DK. I
Death's
can't believe
Advance.
it.
Whew. It's so
Yeah.
good.
God damn it. Yeah, you guys are not going to be able to see this version of DK because Max is getting a nerf
Because of me. Yeah, just
Yeah.
like AMZ.
It's crazy. Content creators like this, they get on the alpha in the first build and then they nerf all the cool stuff that's in that
Yeah, and they
first
talk
build.
about how OP it is and how
Yeah.
can this even
Wait, that
possibly
happened with
engage
Sun
up.
Fury. Didn't Sun Fury get like cut down?
Oh,
a little bit
yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Although
blame
they were
Hopeful for that
doing
one.
like
Yeah, they were
a
disgusting.
lot more damage than other people. But
Yeah.
yeah.
All right,
right.
gamers. I think that's
right.
about
That was
it
kind
for
of a
this
long
pod.
one,
yeah,
wasn't it?
we procced a little 2-hour pod almost, so
Holy
Not
moly.
bad.
Holy.
Yeah. a lot
I
to
have
talk
to be
about
up
though
in
this
6
week.
hours.
What do you gotta do
Enjoy.
tomorrow?
Yeah, and
I gotta do some stuff.
Frank also gets to edit this. He gets to like wake up and then try and edit all this in time to get it out so that we can
Yeah.
actually hit our Friday release date.
So we're finishing this at 1:30 a.m. Pacific time on I
Yeah.
guess Friday morning. It's actually Thursday night. It's actually not. I don't know if you guys knew this. It's actually not the next day until you go to sleep and wake up.
Okay.
But yeah. So as I don't know what time this is gonna come out tomorrow, but just know any later than like noon, just know that Frank was slow.
Yeah. In fact, any later than 10 a.m. I'd say Pacific.
Yeah, I feel like
really.
10 a.m. is fair for this
Yeah.
to be up. Yeah. Yeah.
Bro, it's 4:30 for me.
That you're
You're
always
living
awake
on
at
the-
this time. Stop pretending that this is
Yeah, I like
hard
how
for you.
you like are acting like that's your toil. You're just like,
Okay,
oh, you
but I
guys
mean, like-
made me stay up to 4:30.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you guys like, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be watching YouTube and I have a good time instead.
Oh, you're saying you
not
don't have a
having
good
a
time
good
with us?
time?
That's so fucked up.
Oh, I'm having a great time, you know, because
Wow.
like we talked about like a bunch of great things, but like you know, sometimes when you guys are like yapping.
Us yapping? That I can't believe you accused us of
Yeah,
that. That's so fucked
There's
up.
no way.
All right, Poddy, adieu.
Yep, pod bye.
See you.